ставши на коліно, своє полкове знамено, дивлюсь на нього я востаннє, у нез'ясованій журбі, всю кров мою, всі скитання, воно вібрало у собі. Всю кров мою, всі скитання, воно вібрало у собі. Відвагу нашу нашій волі, загиблих друзів імена, читаю на шовковій волі я полкового знамена, дивлюсь на нього я востаннє, у нез'ясованій журбі, всю кров мою, всі скитання, воно вібрало у собі. Всю кров мою, всі скитання, воно вібрало у собі. Усе, що разом пережито, в обходах вистраждано все. Я знаю, інші гордовито прапороносець понесе. Дивлюсь на нього я востаннє, у нез'ясованій журбі. Всю кров мою, всі скитання, воно вібрало у собі. Всю кров мою, всі скитання, воно вібрало у собі. Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And welcome back, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 192 of the news. We are still here and still reporting.
And of course, we're going to be reporting on the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine, and we have gotten some very interesting news from the Southern Front and a lot of the things that have been going on down there. But of course, before I move on to any of the news, we do have a special little announcement to make. We do have a limited edition merch run going on right now. If you pull up the enforcerstore.com, pretty nice URL actually, pretty happy we have that one. If you type it in and click enter, it will pull up the Enforcer merch store. And if you scroll down, you can actually see that we have the Honey Badger merch. This is actually made by one of our own, our very own, pretty much the Betsy Ross of our channel, 6022 by 1023rd, an incredible viewer, actually the daughter of one of our viewers, and I thank both of them so much for letting us use this. And of course, you can get the sticker, like right here, the shirt, the mug, the hoodie, the thermos. I think we have a thermos. Do we?
Not a thermos, but we do have a mug and a poster of a honey badger sitting in the desert.
And we do have a poster, and so it is pretty cool, and I highly suggest that if you would like to support this channel, please make sure to get some of it, because it helps us to keep this thing running. And also, I have to say, this is honestly my favorite. I've actually, just today, I bought myself a t-shirt, a hoodie, 3 stickers, a mug, and a poster. I literally bought everything that we could get for this specific merch run, because I honestly think it's one of our best, and I really like it a lot. So anyways, with that, let's hop right into the news, starting off with our location unknowns. Now, we don't have a massive amount of location unknowns today. We only have about 9, but in the first one, we can see that the Ukrainians have now advanced onto the location of what appears to be a motor pool for some destroyed Russian vehicles. And so let's check it out. We can hear gunfire and battles going on in the distance, and we can see a destroyed Euro 4320 and also the remains of a BMP-1. You see them laughing at the destruction of these vehicles, and honestly, I can't blame them. It's pretty nice to see. Now we can see inside the Euro 4320, and this looks like a car that has been out on the interstate for far too long, and the junkies finally got to it because this thing is stripped. It looks like it's had some pretty extensive gutting done to it. I'm not sure if that was from the explosions or afterwards. But I don't think this will buff out, and I don't think insurance will cover that. So, with that, still great to see Russian vehicles being knocked out, and we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see some Ukrainian soldiers. And their spirits are high. And the video was deleted. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a massive ammunition depot get destroyed. Unfortunately, there's a cut at the very beginning of this video, which is kind of odd. You'll notice it right there. And I don't know why they did that, but still, the ammo dump was destroyed, and that's something you can clearly see. A lot of orange smoke in that, which makes me believe that it's most likely some kind of a, what was it called, Matthew? The nitric acid?
It could be.
Yeah, so I think there's going to be a lot of people who are missing out on their nitric acid cokes. And I know if you've been around long enough, you know what I mean. If you don't, I'm sorry. You missed out on that, Jim. But we can see that the cloud continues to climb, and I'm not exactly sure what kind of depot was hit. Oh my god. Well, now we can see what used to be the base. And it looks like they turned it into the surface of the moon. There's, I guess you could say, what in the world's the name of that giant crater that the astronauts landed in on Apollo 11? Like, the Sea of Tranquility? It looks like
I didn't even know there was a name to it.
Yeah, it looks like the Sea of Tranquility right there. And Matthew, of course, letting us know he doesn't know a lot about moon geography. Everyone shame Matthew for that, and I'm just kidding. It's something that a lot of people don't know about. But if we pull up the moon Sea of Tranquility, just so that way I can show it to you, Matthew. A Tranquility. Tranquility, here we go. Here's the Sea of Tranquility right here. It's this giant gray area on the moon, and I have to say the Ukrainians made this look like the Sea of Tranquility.
Huh, yeah, I can see the resemblance a little bit.
Kinda. But it looks like the Ukrainians cratered the place. I'm not sure if it was just nitric acid, maybe so, but that's extensive damage for sure. We can now see the drone continuing to pan over the destruction and the carnage down there on the field, and it's impressive to see such a crater. You can tell the scale of this place by that wall. That wall is probably about 7 to 9 feet tall, just taking a rough estimate. And that crater right there is probably about 100 feet deep and about 250 feet wide. So quite an impressive little explosion right there. And with that, we're now on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainians firing the old artillery. The Ukrainians love the artillery, we love the artillery, and I don't think the Ukrainians will ever get enough of this stuff. And so here's the video of them firing off one of their artillery pieces.
Перший наведений.
We can see the Ukrainians contacting their radio controller. We now see the artillery crew getting ready to go, putting the shell into the breach, ramming the shell. They'll now take the charge, put that into the breach.
Повний принесли,
They'll
так?
then ram the charge as well. The breach is closed, and the piece is ready to
Перший
fire.
заряджений.
You see that they're just waiting for the order to fire. Everything's ready to go.
Третий заряжен. Два батареи залпом.
And there they go. The rounds are going down range.
А, ще по одному.
They're now reloading the piece once more. Putting in the shell, ramming the charge. The piece is now ready again.
Перший готов.
Третій стрільбу закінчив, ви це по два.
Вогонь.
Перший ще один. Ну, ти ж один стрельнув, стріляй ще один.
Давай, вогонь.
The audio's a little off, but you're still getting the picture that they are raining down the fire downrange. We can now see it cut to another angle of the artillery piece. Goodness, those are some small artillery pieces right there. They look like 105 millimeter most likely, but these things have got some pretty decent little punch on them. We now see the angle change once more, showing us the artillery battery in what appears to be a different location. The piece is firing once more, and the crew's reloading. This time with a much faster pace, it appears, than before. Gosh. The artillery is always impressive, no matter the caliber, no matter the number. It's always amazing to see artillery in action, and it's great to know that the Ukrainians are using everything at their fingertips, pretty much, to try and push the Russians back out of Ukraine. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see the Super Bonker 9000 has returned.
It's back.
It's back, baby, and you can see one of the little Super Bonker Cheems fellas right there on the side of the peon. Oh my god. I can't get over imagining Russians getting obliterated by something that has Cheems on the side of it. This is the
That's got to be insult to injury.
You know, just imagine you get blown away by an artillery shell, and then you see, no, imagine your friends get blown away by an artillery shell, you surrender to the Ukrainians, and then they're marching you back to a collection or filtration facility, and then you see the Super Bonker 9000 as you walk by. Just imagine that. Oh my god.
Just the Doge on the side.
Oh my lord. I would feel disgraced to know that my fellow soldiers have been knocked out by the Super Bonker, and I think that's what makes this thing the funniest thing on the battlefield. Once again, quick little note, these things are called Cheems. If you do not know about internet memes, Cheems is a variation of the Doge. You can actually see the Cheems right there. There's also another one right here. This is the one that's more commonly used. But you can also see the original, I believe, Doge dog that picture is based off of, and the original Doge dog itself, which is a famous meme at this point. Everyone knows it. Everyone loves it. It's even been turned into a loaf of bread. It's just a cool meme. It's funny. And then on top of that, it's even funnier when you put it onto an artillery piece and you fire at Russians with it. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from the quick little story about Sheems and the Super Bonker 9000 again. And now we're moving on into watching a Russian command vehicle get knocked out by a 30 mil. From what I'm assuming, this 30 mil may have been mounted onto a BMP-2 because it looks like it was firing rather rapidly at the Russian command vehicle, and it looks like it got some pretty good hits. We can now see the little BTR that's being used as a command vehicle is smoldering and smoking from those hits, and it's been taken out. Another Russian vehicle, another command vehicle that's been knocked out by the Ukrainians. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into our next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainians have come up with a test course. Now, just in case y'all don't know, there is actually a Hyundai plant, Montgomery, Alabama. Child labor. They kind of got in trouble for using child labor out there a while ago. I guess it's just what Hyundai does. I don't know. But anyways, there's a massive Hyundai factory outside of my hometown of Montgomery, Alabama. And out here in this thing, they have a giant test course. You can actually see part of it right here. And also, it is, if I remember, it would be... I think that's actually it. I think that's the little incline that it goes up and you see it from the interstate. But anyways, that is where they test out a lot of the Hyundai vehicles once they come off the assembly line to make sure that they were put together well. And in this little clip I'm about to show y'all are actually about to see that the Ukrainians are also testing their homemade buggies, much like Hyundai tests their cars, or any car company tests their cars for that matter. And so here's the video. Also, sorry for the poor graphics quality. When you see them climbing over the hill, coming down the hill.
Well, they're actually pretty capable, actually.
Yeah, they are. That's what's surprising to me. For homemade buggies, they're really well made.
I smell a new industry coming for Ukraine after the war.
I really do, too. I think I'd love to have a Ukrainian buggy. Them going around some pretty tight turns, and they're handling them like champs. I mean, honestly, some really good buggies. And so with that, that's the end of that little video, and it's very interesting to see that not only are these buggies, which are being produced in mass numbers by what is pretty much a one-man operation in some parts of the country, are actually incredibly competent and capable buggies coming out of that whole entire ordeal. And so it's great to know that they apparently are quite maneuverable and capable, and hopefully the Ukrainians will be able to get the most out of them on the field. And so with that, we're now moving on into the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we see a drone attack by the Ukrainians onto the Russians. This is apparently onto a Russian mortar position. And then we're going to mute that. Y'all already know why I do that. The drone's now moving forward and getting lined up on this mortar position that is right below him. We can see that the drone has low battery. That's good to know. And we now see them dropping the bomblet. And... oh, wait a minute. It got the mortar ammo. Nice. But it didn't get the mortar, it seems. But it did take out the ammo. So without the ammo, the mortar can't work, obviously. So it kind of knocked it out in a way. And we see that the ammo continues to burn. We see another explosion. And so with that, that's the end of the video, and it's pretty interesting to see that the Ukrainians have knocked out another small mortar unit with one of these drones. A very cheap and efficient way to fight the Russians on their own terms. With that, we're now moving on into our last bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see the combat losses for the day. These actually come from the Ministry of Ukraine's the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine's website, and here are the numbers for today. The Russians have lost 48,700 soldiers killed, another 350 being killed today. Another 12 tanks, bringing that number finally, today is that day that we saw the number pass over 2,000 tanks. The Ukrainians have now knocked out, most likely, over half of the active Russian tanks in the entire Russian Federation. We've seen another 21 armored personnel carriers knocked out, which brings that number up to 4,366. We've also seen another 11 artillery systems destroyed today, another 2 MLRSs, another 2 drones, 2 more cruise missiles were shot down, 8 fuel trucks were destroyed, and a special equipment vehicle was also destroyed as well, bringing us a pretty decent little loss count, specifically for today, and making those numbers extraordinarily high, and also quite believable when you compare them to previous historical figures. And so with that, impressive to see that the Ukrainians continue to commit decent losses against the Russian armed forces, and hopefully we'll see those numbers continue to climb as the Ukrainians take back more land. So with that, we're now going to be moving into the Kharkiv area, where we have nothing to report. We do know that the Ukrainians apparently are conducting some kind of a counteroffensive in this area, but as far as we know, they may have not made any progress, or they may have made a lot of progress. We're not entirely sure. We are not trying to report on the exact locations of these units. Of course, the Ukrainians have asked for a complete blackout, and I hope that every channel out there is respecting that media blackout and making sure that we're not giving away the exact position, location, and actions. Excuse me? Oh. Well, anyways, I hope that there's no one out there giving away exact positions, locations, and activities of Ukrainian armed forces, because, of course, that could lead to soldiers getting killed, and nothing on YouTube is worth leading more Ukrainian soldiers to get killed through loose lips just for, just for YouTube purposes. So we're not... Yeah, so we're not going to be reporting on anything like that, and I highly suggest that if y'all do see anyone doing that on YouTube, if whoever they are, please make sure to politely say, hey, could you make sure to tone down the information a little bit, because that could lead people to get killed, and we don't want folks getting killed. So with that, we're now going to be moving out of the Kharkiv area and past Chuiv, where, of course, there's nothing to report. The Ukrainians are probably down there juggling, doing, the fire-breathing tricks. I don't know, because they're not doing anything. The soldiers that are in the Chuiv area have the easiest job in this war. They just sit there and just make sure that that front line stays the way it is. So I'm pretty happy for them. It's good to know that nothing's going on there. Meanwhile, in Balaklia, the 93rd Brigade's kind of gone on vacation. They are still in the area as far as I know, but I haven't seen them doing a lot of activity as much as they once were, so for now, there's no news to report there either. That is also the same in the Izium area, although we have heard that a Ukrainian counterattack apparently is moving in the direction of Izium, and maybe having some success, but then again, we have no idea. We don't even have any video evidence to say what's going on in that area. And so finally, we're now moving down into the area of, let me make sure I can divide the news up properly tonight, because we have a lot of pieces of news, but honestly, we blew through the location unknowns incredibly quickly. So with that, we're now in the Severodonetsk area, where you can see that the 63rd Brigade's artillery units were on the move today. This appears to be a 2S1, or an S21, whichever way it's said. And unfortunately, I have to keep the video muted, but we can see the SPG backing up. The soldier climbs up on top of it and takes a seat. We can now see that SPG moving down the road at somewhat considerable speed. We can also see them operating a DJI Mavic drone and taking it all from the front of the SPG. And we can now see that 2S1 firing, most likely from the drone's information. And we can now see a vehicle burning in the distance from what we can assume was the artillery strike from that 2S1. Impressive to see, and I've got to say, it's wonderful to know that Ukrainian units like the 63rd are continuing to slam artillery fire down onto the Russians and ensure that they are taking losses in one way, shape, or form. And so with that, we are now moving on into the next bit of news. But before we move on into, I guess you could say, the southern Donetsk area, as well as the southern front and Melitopol, we are now going to take a quick moment to address 3 questions from the chat. I know it's a little bit early for a question segment. Usually it happens about 5 minutes from now, but honestly, we just blew through all of that news so quickly. I'm like, well, we kind of have to make sure that we keep the news segments divided up. And so with that, what do we got with the polls?
All right, so folks, for our first poll, this is kind of like an appetizer poll because it's really not that detailed. But the question is, do the homemade Ukrainian buggies look capable? It looks like 78% of you believe, yes, they will work very well. 18% said somewhat, and 3% said no, they should use better buggies. Now, for me, I think they look like they're going to work pretty well. The suspension's pretty robust looking on those buggies, and they also look like, for homemade ones, they're built pretty consistently. But Enforcer, what are your thoughts?
I'd honestly have to say, I think they look incredibly capable and pretty nice, actually. I would have to say, like if I had to buy one, I would get one. I don't know how much they cost. I'm sure they're actually pretty cheap because they're homemade almost. But they look pretty neat. Honestly, that kind of raises the question to me, what kind of buggies does the U.S. military use, if any? I'm sure it's just used for special forces here in the U.S. What kind of bunnies does the U.S. military use? They're using rabbits, y'all. Let's see. Does the military use dune buggies? Nearly 250 Marine utility task vehicles are getting new floorboards. Well, that's good to know, but what kind are they?
That looks like a Polaris buggy of some sort.
It kind of did. I'm trying to make sure, though. Man, Desert Patrol Vehicle. Maybe that's it? Oh, wow, those things are cool. That honestly looks a lot like it. Yeah, that honestly looks a lot like it. It's interesting.
That might be it.
Honestly, though, do you notice it's kind of odd how they're in the middle of a yellow desert and they paint the buggies dark black? Like that doesn't really blend. I'm kind of looking at that there and I'm like, huh, that's a little bit of a problem. Let's see, those are seals apparently. They didn't blur their faces. Usually they blur their faces, but anyways. Let's see. I'm trying to find more about it here. Light strike vehicle. Okay, that looks like the same thing pretty much. Oh, it's the improved desert patrol vehicle. Well, you see another version of it. Long-range desert group. Those things were used by the British in the Second World War. Actually, they used all kinds of vehicles like this Chevrolet. They also used, I think, a lot of Jeeps, if I remember correctly. But yeah, there's a Jeep. But they used a lot of those. Anyways, they were kind of like the first guys who were trying to use dune buggies before there were dune buggies. What in the world is that? That thing looks like a spider.
What in the world? That windshield is whack.
It is. How in the world do you even wipe, mud off of that? There's only one windshield. Mud just gets on it, you're screwed. You gotta, get a handkerchief and start wiping it off the front. But let's see. It's a concept combat vehicle that was unveiled in 2000. So it didn't go anywhere. Okay, so it looked really cool. It looked really modern. I thought this is something that they may be trying out now, but apparently this fell flat on its face, and I can kind of see why, because it looks like it would have been a little too impractical. Also, something else that's crazy is that apparently this was built on the skeleton of a Ford F-350.
Now, I would have honestly never guessed that.
Yeah, I would have never guessed that either, because this thing does not look like a Ford F-350, but apparently it is. So let's go back real quick. I'm still trying to find the one that the U.S. is probably using to this day. Ooh, wow, that's ugly. So I guess the one we're using now is the light strike vehicle, which is pretty much the exact same as the Desert Patrol vehicle, just a little bit more improved, and it looks a lot like the Ukrainian dune buggy. So with that, I would have to say, considering it looks like a tried and true design that the United States has been using for quite some while, I do believe they're incredibly competent. And so with that, I hope that answers the poll, and now we're moving on to the first question of the night. And so, Matthew, who do we have as the first questionnaire?
All right, so our first super chat of the night goes to David Bryan, who puts in a $20 donation, and David does not leave us a comment. So we're just going to recognize David's support and thank him very much for supporting the Leaf Spring Army and the channel to keep on running. So thank you very much, David, for your support. And Enforcer, would you like to add anything to that?
Yes, I would, David. I would like to thank you so much for your support and helping out this Leaf Spring Army, because without y'all's support, we aren't able to keep running. Y'all are the only thing that keeps us in between living and dead, full and starving, and busy and not busy, and literally drinking busy coffee. So I thank you so much for the support, David. It does mean a lot and helps us to keep this thing on going, so that way we can find out the bunnies that the U.S. military uses. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, and we are now on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our next one, we have a $20 super chat from Daddy's Deliveries, who has a very interesting little script for us here. Who says, "Daddy, you see all the doors in this here place?" Daughter says, "Yes, Daddy." Daddy says, "Daddy delivered them." Daughter says, "My daddy delivered all the doors in this here place."
What?
I have no idea what that meant.
I
That
don't
was
know what
kind of
that
weird.
means, but I do thank you for the support, Daddy's Delivery, and that is just a weird name, honestly. That's just, I don't know about y'all, but that's that's kind of weird. But I do thank you for the support, and I thank you so much for helping us to keep on moving on with this channel and helping us to keep it running. And look at the guy down there, Matthew. What's with the clickbait titles? We're about to get to it, okay? Just calm
Yeah,
down.
it's like just wait, be
Yeah.
patient, man.
Yeah, it's like I don't think anyone gets it at this point. When I put that stuff in all caps, we eventually get to that point in the news where I actually talk about what that is. So just calm down for a minute, my boy, and we'll get to that bit of the news, all right? So with that, thank you once again for the support, Daddy's Delivery. We will make sure to, I guess, get a delivery. I don't know. But with that, thank you once again. It does help our channel to keep running. And with that, we're now on to the final question of this segment before we move on into the next bit of news.
All right, and folks, a new poll is coming soon, so stand by. And also, for our last super chat of the segment, we have a $20 donation from Mark Jensen, who says, very simply, Donut Fund. And Mark, I'm going to first off say thank you very much for the support. And I hate to admit it, I'm going to be honest. We haven't gotten donuts ever since PsyOps mentioned it like a week and a half ago, but we need to get some. But we did get pizza. We had that tonight. So the pizza fund is being utilized quite well, but we need to utilize the donut fund.
We need the donut fund, dang it. And I'm going to have to go get a donut just so that way I can say I did. So tomorrow, oh, wait a minute, hang on. Let me check my schedule. Yes, yeah. Tomorrow I can go and get a donut. So I'm probably going to go and try and do that tomorrow. And so with that, thank you so much, Mark, for the support to the Donut Fund. And I'm going to go get one to appease everyone who's put in support for our Donut Fund. I'm going to have to get a big donut. So with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I'm glad you're helping us to keep this channel running. And for some reason, y'all, I hate to say this, but I am having absolute straights tonight with the coffee I drank. I drank some busy coffee. It's nothing wrong with the coffee, but I think I drink it so fast, I feel like I'm about to throw up the whole time. So, I have a mesh trash can right beside me, and if I have to throw up, it's going to be graded like, well, actually it's going to be filtered like some fine, dirty water. Maybe, if someone is listening out there, not Matthew, but someone else, they can hopefully run me a water in here, or someone can get me a water, because honestly, I think I'm literally about to throw up. So, with that, well, hopefully I won't.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, hopefully.
And Enforcer, if you're feeling that bad, we could come up with an alternative real quick. I could simply interact with the chat if you want. It's totally up to you, though.
Do we have any bottled water around?
So I could actually go run and grab you one real quick if you want.
No, you just keep everyone busy for a second. Just chit chat with everyone, just talk about something, and I'll be back in just like a minute. So give me just a second. I'll be right back.
All right. So, folks, this is a first for the entire stream. Enforcer Matt is left alone with the audience. This could be very dangerous. This could be risky, but the Enforcer has left me. So, guess what? It is now time to go through a few of your comments. And I'll also let you in on something else. I was actually working on a poll to ask you, and I'll go ahead and give you a preview to the question. Which vehicle would you choose as your replacement to Ukrainian buggies? Obviously, I'm going to put Ford Raptor on that list just because that's a really cool truck. But there's also going to be some other options I'm thinking about. So if you have any suggestions, feel free to put them in the live chat, and I will see what I can do about adding that to it. But yes, I see everybody saying, yay, Matt's on the show. And yes, Matt is on the show. Sadly, though, I'll let y'all in on another little interesting thing about the stream. I'm actually not involved in the actual gathering of the news itself. I'm just involved in the question segment, as well as covering for the Enforcer when he's in times like this. So I actually could not carry on the news if I wanted to, but I see the Enforcer give me the thumbs up, so he's coming back. So I can stop babbling now in just a moment. He'll be back in just a minute. So he should be back on the mic any second now. I'm trying to time it just right. Cue the elevator music right now. He's coming back anytime now.
All right, so I'm back.
There he is.
I'm back. I just got myself some water, and I have talked a whole load today. So there's no spit in my mouth right now. And I felt like I was about to throw up. So I drank some water. Hopefully that fixes the problem. And that was a mad dash to go grab some water. But I'm back. And hopefully not throwing up. So with that, now we're going to be moving out of this question segment and into the next segment of news, which will include the Donetsk region, the Southern Front, and Melitopol. Starting off in Orlivka, we saw today that the Ukrainians were hitting Russian positions. I have to mute it real quick, but we can see the Ukrainian drone looking down at the Russians in what appears to be a small little hole in the ground. We now see the artillery coming right down onto that position, and it couldn't be any sooner. The artillery continues to rain down, and as it does, I don't know what is wrong with the coffee tonight. I don't really know what's wrong with me, because I feel burning hot right now, and my fan's running. I actually pointed it at me in the middle of the video, and I've had some water, so at least I don't feel like I'm throwing up.
Now, Enforcer,
no.
if you want to, we can actually, if you have to, call it early, because we don't want you going through the stream struggling.
Nah, we'll keep it running. Because here's the thing. I made a promise to everyone, and I know that Matthew's probably heard this. I made a promise I'm going to cover the news every single night of the war, and we've only missed one day, and that was because of a false copyright strike. I don't care hell or high water if I'm dying over here. This news will be covered. So with that, I see some people saying we may have gotten COVID. Maybe. I don't know. But
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. God willing, we didn't. But right now I'm going through some bad straits, and everyone's like hot flash, and I'm probably. But anyway, so you see the artillery still raining down on the Russian position. When you see the drone taking a really good look at it as it continues to rain on down onto that spot. We can now see another artillery round slamming into the Russian position, making sure to let them know that they're going to be shaken, not stirred. See what I did there?
Good one.
Thank you. We can now see the drone looking back down at the Russian position, and it looks like they've given them a good little thrashing down there. It looks like a couple of artillery rounds hit almost directly onto the hole, if not within it, most likely taking out the Russians under the ground. We see the drone still looking down there and taking a really good look. And it looks like, honestly, they're not having a good time. I don't know about you, Matthew, but I don't call this a good trench.
No, I wouldn't say it's a good time. They're having a worse time than you are.
Yeah, probably. Right now, now the water's hit me, so now I feel like I'm filled with water. But anyways, with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of news from the Donetsk region, where we can see further down the line, closer to Donetsk itself, we saw 2 Russians, 1 trench. If y'all get where I'm going with that, you get it. If you don't, you don't. So with that, here's the video. We see this Ukrainian soldier looking into the trenches where these Russians were. They are absolutely filled with garbage.
Тут, пожалуйста, блядь, сразу вийшов з техніки, посрав, блядь, викинув трохи мусор, блядь, і пішов.
What the hell? They got a Barbie bike.
You're kidding.
It's
I had to look up to see it, and I was like, what?
It's those Russians from that video. You remember it was like 11 years ago, Matthew, where they're like, I'm a Barbie girl in the Barbie world. Their life is plastic. It's fantastic. And I can't sing too much of it because of copyright. Y'all know that, but I can't believe it. It's a Barbie bike. It's literally purple.
Опа, на велик сів і поїхав. Поїхав, бігом. Тут нарисований хрест. Помолився. Ще посрав. І пішов в столову. Пожалуйста, тут у них була.
You can see the Ukrainian continuing to walk down the trench and just observe the absurdity of Russian life on the front.
Поїв.
And I have to say, I'm also in complete disbelief of the absurdity of Russians living on the front. And so with that, that's the end of that video, and just a pretty crazy one all around with what the Russians had in that trench. And so with that, we're now going to be moving down into the Donetsk city area itself, where we saw a burning APC somewhere on the front lines. We see right there the BTR being hit. It looks like it came clean through the right side and out the left. Wait a minute. It actually looks like it came in from the left and out the right. Yeah, it came in from the left and came out the right side. The tank's now smoking and billowing. We now see the tank burning. And Ray Detweiler said, "You are drunk, dude. Just tell us, we can hear it in your voice, LOL." I will tell you this, I have never even had a sip of alcohol in my entire life. So with that, I'll just let you know, I'm not drunk. I never drink. If you drink, that's fine. Personally, I don't. So with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of news out of the Donetsk front. But before we move on, considering that a lot of the news tonight is incredibly short, and we're actually, because of that, running out of videos to cover and things to talk about, in the Donetsk front, it appears that the counterattacks are going somewhat well, but we once again have to remember that the Donetsk front area is the most heavily defended on both sides. So if the Russians commit an offensive here, it most likely will make very little progress. If the Ukrainians conduct a counterattack here, it most likely will also have very little progress, considering how entrenched both sides are in this area. And so with that in mind, while the Ukrainians may be appearing to conduct counterattacks, and we've also seen the Russians push a little bit more ground in the Pisky area, I don't think we're going to see any massive movements here, because it's just nearly impossible due to the frontline situation. So with that, I just got to be honest with you. I don't really think there will be any progress made here, although we do hear that the Ukrainians are attempting it. Once again, while I am pro-Ukrainian, my battlefield biases, well, my actual biases don't really come into play into my battlefield analysis. And so while I do support Ukraine 100%, I do look at the actual facts and what's logical on the field, and this is one of the areas that it would be the most difficult to ever have any kind of progress in whatsoever. Even in the north here, because y'all may be looking at this black line, which outlines the former borders of the DPR and LPR before the war, you may be saying, well, Enforcer, the Russians pushed over these front lines up here, that's about half of them, and in fact, they pushed the Ukrainians off of that heavily defended line down here as well. And you would be correct to say that the Ukrainians did abandon those heavily defended areas, but you do have to remember, in both of those cases, it's because the Russians pushed from a different area. They didn't push through the front lines, they came in from behind. For example, near Mariupol, the forces that pushed the Ukrainians off the line here, from all the way from, I believe it's Novoazovsk, all the way up to Volnovakha, those forces came from Crimea and drove all the way from Melitopol to Mariupol and then north. Then on top of that, in the northern area near Luhansk, the Russian forces just drove in across the border from every direction and therefore filled in this area, and because of that and the fear of the Ukrainians becoming encircled on those heavily defended positions, they then had to pull off. If you look at historical precedent, for example, with the Germans and the French in 1940, you will also see the exact same thing in between the Germans and the French. The Germans didn't punch through the Maginot Line, and the French didn't punch through the Siegfried Line either. It was the Germans bypassing the Maginot through the Argonne Forest. Once again, they did that in the First World War, they did it in the Second World War, and they bypassed it pretty much and went around the Maginot Line, which is kind of what the Russians did here with the heavily defended lines in the Donetsk and Luhansk region. And so that's the only reason that we saw the Ukrainians get peeled off the lines here. And so with that in mind, I don't think the Ukrainians will be peeled off the lines here, and I don't think the Russians or the pro-Russian forces could be either. This is the one area at the front line where I believe it will be too difficult to pull off, at least for now. And so with that, we're now going to be moving out of the Donetsk region and into the southern front, near the area of Hopefully I pronounced that correctly, as we watch a Russian BMP-2 get destroyed. And also, just for those of y'all to know, I don't know if it was a short time spell or something, but I feel a lot better now. I think the water is everything I needed. So let's give it up to water. So with that, here's the video of this BMP-2 getting destroyed. We can see a bomblet being dropped onto the BMP-2. Right onto the fuel tank, and the fuel tank immediately catches on fire. We can also see the Z clearly on front of that BMP-2, letting us know that it is certainly a Russian vehicle that has now been destroyed by the Ukrainians and will never be used again. And so with that, that is the end of the video, and it's great to see. One thing I can never overstate too much, it is incredibly wonderful to see that Russian tanks, armored personnel carriers, and supplies continue to be destroyed day by day. And I know that a lot of people like to be idealistic, and I never blame them in saying that I wish this war will be won with the fewest amount of lives shed, or the smallest amount of blood shed. And while I do understand that sentiment, one does have to remember that wars are a very terrible thing, and to think that a war can be won without shedding blood is about like an instance of saying we can drive a car without expending any kind of energy. It's just a fact of life, and it's good to know that considering that we are supporting the Ukrainians, they're knocking out Russians like one of those little electric lamp things you put out on your porch that zaps mosquitoes. And so with that, that's the end of that little video. And we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of news from the southern front, which is towards the area of Polochi, where we saw a Russian tank was hit today. And there's Matthew throwing up the questions that matter.
There's that poll that said was going to go up 20 minutes ago. There it is.
We can see a Russian tank right there. Oh, wait a minute. Did you see that, Matthew? That looks like an airburst. I think that was an airburst.
Wow.
That was something.
That was a hell of a shockwave.
Yeah. Tank's now on fire. It looks like the driver's trying to pull it out into the open road. Oh, wait a minute. I just saw one on the crew bale. He's way down here at the bottom right there. Man, that guy can run. We got a Forrest Gump right here, folks. He jumped off the tank and he was gone. He was gone. We now see the tank sitting in the middle of the road. It appears to actually be something like a T-90. Now the Russians have brought in a truck to observe the burning tank from up close. And we all know that the best way to observe burning tanks is right beside them, because nothing will ever happen like ammunition exploding if you're standing right near them. That's just an OSHA regulation. And so with that, that's the end of the video, and it's great to see that the Ukrainians used an airburst artillery round, which is one of the rarest things that we've ever seen in this war, to hit this Russian tank and apparently lead it to be destroyed due to the fire. And I gotta say, it is impressive to see. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into our next bit of news, which is actually in the Melitopol region. But before we get there, let's analyze the southern front and see what we've got. So, going off of what we have seen on video today, the Ukrainians are still inflicting casualties on Russian forces, but so far we haven't seen any ground being made by either side. As per usual, the southern front, all the way from Volnovakha to Vasilivka, has been one of the most static areas of the front line in this war for the past several months. And so I do not believe that any action will be going on here, but it will happen eventually. After the Ukrainians push the Russians out of the Kherson area, I believe that this will most likely be the next place that the Ukrainians will push a counterattack. And I know that someone's about to say, hey, OPSEC, man, but the Ukrainians will probably announce it months in advance, much like they did the counterattack here in the Kherson area. So it's not really an OPSEC thing because they'll probably let everyone know. But still, it's an interesting thing. And also, if we look at the southern front, if we move out of the Hyundai plant in Montgomery, and we look at the southern front line area, we can see that it looks largely, wow, wait a minute, are these like, okay, I was about to say, are these fields filled with water? I was like, that's insane. But it's apparently just a different kind of crop, although from a distance, it looks like water. Anyways, scrolling on out, it looks like the ground is largely flat through this area, which isn't surprising. Ukraine is mostly flat. However, one thing that would interest me is, can we actually get a topographical map of this area to show us the elevation features? We can! Alright, so looking at this map, It appears that there's a ridgeline here towards Kamyanske. There's also several of them, actually. There's 3 of them from Kamyanske to Vasilivka, which would make incredible defensive lines for whoever is holding that area. And we also see something of a ridge going all the way from Ororkiv to Polokhi. And we can also see no such ridge, except for this one, traveling in between Polokhi and into the Krasnopolnya area. So it largely seems like flat land because the topography of the area, if we go over here to a place like Moldova, you can see that the terrain is a lot more jagged and rigid than the land out here in pretty much the flat plains of Ukraine. So this seems like the area that would be most conducive for the Russians to commit some kind of offensive, considering it's flat. Their I guess you could say, doctrine could be implemented a lot better, and so it's more advantageous for the Ukrainians to keep a defensive position here, as the Russians, although poorly trained and poorly equipped, could probably perform a little bit better in this area. But still, it's actually really interesting to see. And another nutty thing is, what in the world is this stuff out here? This looks like massive pits. Let's go see what that looks like on the map. Dochuchavesk. Let's see if we can find that. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. We just have to change the layer. Oh my lord! These are like giant marble pits. That's insane. They're like the size of that whole town. Let's see if we can drop. Oh man, we can't drop down there. That's sad. But anyways, really interesting to see, and it's actually interesting to take a quick little look at the terrain of Ukraine, because we rarely ever take a look at this, and 2 major things that play into the factors of war is the terrain and the weather. Those are things that aren't really looked at a lot, along with the supply side of things that actually determine who will win and who will lose. Of course, the supplies are the overall determining factor, but the terrain and the weather also play a massive role in that as well. And so with that, now that we've taken a really good look at the southern front, and we may revisit that map here in a bit, we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of news in Melitopol. So starting off in Melitopol, we saw that a fire broke out within the city, and it looks like it may be because of Ukrainian strikes on Russian ammunition depots once again. We can see the fire raging out there in the distance. And the Ukrainians have struck Melitopol multiple times with precision-guided weapons, hitting ammunition depots and causing fires much like this one. And so with that, that's the end of the video, and it's great to see that the Ukrainians are still striking Russian ammunition depots in this area and leading the Russians into having to constantly pump supplies into an area where they will probably never be used and then lost immediately. Moving on into the next video, we can actually see the rockets exploding in Melitopol that may have led to that ammunition fire. We can see the missiles or rockets flying in right there. We can hear the explosions in the distance. And we can see another missile coming in. Now, did I see that right, Matthew? But did that look like it launched right off the ground on film? It looks like it kind of did.
Yeah, it did, actually. I was trying to study it. It looks like it did.
I think that may just be a... Wait a minute. If that's a normal MLRS that we're saying here, because that's what we would have to be saying, and looking at how far Melitopol is behind the lines, was it just coming over the horizon so fast it looked like it was launched in the distance, or was it actually launched in the distance? Because if it was, it would have had to have been the Russians, or the Ukrainians got an MLRS battery behind the lines and then started firing at Melitopol from there. That's highly unlikely, but that's interesting to see.
Офигеть, это чего? Это где приземлилось?
Не знаю.
Это осколки летят.
Нет, это не осколки.
А что?
And with that, that's the end of the video, and we can see that the Russians, apparently, from what I could see in the live chat, someone said it's another S-300 fail, and if it was, we saw that thing fail like 3 times on film. That thing slammed into the same neighborhood 3 times. That's actually nuts. I don't know if that would be an S-300, but we will look into that story a little bit more and try and see if we can get some clarification for it. And so with that, it's good to see that the Russians are doing their local homegrown attacks on Russian ammunition depots with their own S-300s. And so with that, we're now going to be moving out of the Southern Front as a whole, and we're now going to be moving towards our last segment of news for the night, which will be in the Enerhodar area as well as the Kherson area, which is where we have heard the rumors that the Russians may be retreating en masse back towards the river. We don't know that for sure. Once again, we are respecting the media blackout on this channel, and so we can't ever tell y'all for certain where Ukrainian forces are, what they're doing, and how successful they are right now, because the Ukrainians have requested that we don't give that kind of information. But before we get to all of that, which is the huge news for the night, and the reason why we have the thumbnail though and the title the way it is, we're going to take a quick pause to address 3 more questions from the chat, and after we answer those 3 questions, we'll then be moving on into the next segment of news.
All right, so before we move on to our questions, we actually have a poll to address. So the question was, which vehicle would you choose as a replacement to Ukrainian buggies? You must choose the best choice. And yes, I had to add that little extra segment in there to make sure that those of you that want to pick an option, pick the best option out of the 4. So it looks like the most popular option was the Toyota Land Cruiser with 29% of the vote. And, actually the Ford Raptor was with 34% of the vote.
God
the
bless
Land Cruiser
you.
was the... Yeah, I was looking straight at it, didn't see it. But the Raptor had 34%. The Land Cruiser had 30%. The Hilux had 22%. That's kind of shocking. And the TRX had 15%. So I would have to say Hilux all the way just because the thing is basically indestructible. But I also like the looks of the Ford Raptor. The Land Cruiser is just a legend. The one I'd be most worried about is the TRX just because it's a Ram. But Enforcer, what are your thoughts?
I got to tell you, folks, the Toyota Hilux is the undefeated champion of the off-roading vehicle, especially the older ones, not the new ones. We're talking about the ones that everyone in the world used, all the way from, I guess you could say, sub-Saharan African countries during their, I guess you could say, coups and juntas and civil wars, all the way to the modern day in the Middle East. These things are, I guess you could say, the undefeated Toyota Hilux Technical. Let me just type that in. I'm sure we'll find a million of them. Here we go. These things are the undefeated, I guess you could say, off-road kind of technical vehicle. If I did not have a buggy and I had to pick something that would go off-road, the Toyota Hilux would be it. There's no other question. This thing is just good at its job. It's good off-road.
There's a video of it loaded with bricks and it's going over a bump.
Yeah, and that looks like a newer one too, so it looks like the legacy carries on even with the newer ones. And if y'all watch Top Gear, they actually took one of these Toyota Hiluxes and they ran it through the ringer. I think they even had it crushed by a building or thrown off a building or something, and it still drove. You could still use it after throwing it off a building, which is the best sales pitch I've ever seen for anything that would have to be rugged and go off-road. And I know what y'all are all saying, but Enforcer, the Ford Raptor, it looks cool. And yes, it does look cool, but I don't know. I mean, like, honestly, in terms of off-road performance, is it good? You know, I think it...
Now, that is probably one of the coolest looking trucks that's on the market, but I will have to say, I would rather have a Hilux in a war situation than a Raptor.
Oh, I would too, because one question I have is that this looks wonderful. It's honestly, in my opinion, like Matthew said, I agree with him. It's a really cool looking truck, but my question is this a designer truck? If y'all know what I'm saying, is this the kind of truck that is supposed to look rugged, but it isn't really rugged? Because it looks really nice, and that's kind of the thing that throws me off, is that Hiluxes look like they're made to get a job done. They're not made for anything else beyond that. They're just made to meet a certain set of parameters, and beyond that, it is what it is. The Ford Raptor, on the other hand, it looks like it's designed with a little bit of style involved, and when style starts getting put into the question, it starts to raise the questions in my head. Is this thing really good off-road or not? I know that some of y'all may have a Ford Raptor, and let me know if y'all have off-roaded it and if it does really good or not, or as good as a Hilux, because I'd honestly like to know. So with that, we're now going to be moving on from this. And also, one other thing I like about Fords is that they got those cooled seats that make your butt feel wet. You know, like it feels like you're sitting in a bucket of water.
That's such an interesting way to describe that feature.
Yeah, because you know what it is, Matthew, because you sit down in that thing, you click the cooled seat, and that thing feels like it's literally forming water under you, like you're sitting in a bucket of water. But
It really does. It's like pumping out like cold and humidity at the same time.
yeah, it's so freaking weird. I don't know how their cooled seats work, but anyways, with that, we're now going to be moving on from that poll, and we're now going to answer the first question of this segment.
All right, so the first one of this segment goes to none other than Magic Sky Girl, a channel legend who puts in a $50 donation and says, "Congrats to Enforcer Matt on your premiere solo on the channel. You blew up the chat, and Enforcer is getting Matt's bug, and hopefully he's not. It sounds like he's doing better over there, but I can't tell. The Enforcer masked it pretty good. But yeah, that wasn't a bad solo. I was kind of caught off guard by it. For these things, you always have to prepare. The Enforcer always spends, hours preparing for this thing. So I was thrown right into the pit of fire. So not too bad for a first one. And unfortunately, the Enforcer can't comment on it because he wasn't here. He was running around trying to find water.
Yeah, so I don't even know what he said or did, but I hope it was something that y'all all enjoyed, because Matthew doesn't really get a segment of his own on this channel, but maybe in the future, I don't know. Maybe he will if y'all enjoy it. Maybe he'll make his own videos and there'll be special little segments or something. I don't know. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. I'm glad you did enjoy Matthew's little segment. And also to answer, I mask a lot of things incredibly well on my end through my voice. I know that a lot of people think I always sound like I'm bristling with energy and just ready to go. But sometimes I honestly want to sound like this because I'm just tired, or, I've had a long day or something like that. So while I sound all happy and cheery, I make sure to always cover up how I'm doing incredibly well. This is about the war in Ukraine. It's not about me, so I don't want my personal emotions and stuff like that and how I'm actually feeling being reflected in my voice, because I feel like it's kind of a little cheap. So with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does answer the question in a way, and with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And folks, I hate to get back on it for just a moment, but I have to address it because I saw it in the live chat. Somebody said the G-Wagon 6x6 would be a good option for the war. Now, that would be a good option if it didn't cost, I think, like 1.2 or 1.5 million or something like that. It's outrageously expensive, but a really cool thing. And also, shout out to Whistling Diesel for putting out that video of absolutely thrashing a G-Wagon on the dunes. That was absolutely wild to see on video. And I think he's the only one crazy enough to actually spend that much on that car and go out and put it through its paces like that. But pretty durable, I got to say. I wouldn't take it into a war, but man, it can hold up pretty good. And Enforcer, have you seen that video yet?
I haven't actually, but sadly, I would love to show it on stream with everyone and share it, but I'm not sure if it would be a copyright thing,
It would.
Because just to explain to everyone again, we were down if you didn't find our stream on, I believe it was Wednesday, if I'm correct. Wouldn't have found our stream because we couldn't run one. We weren't allowed to. I tried both nights on Tuesday and Wednesday. Excuse me, and I actually saw that for those 2 nights, I was getting API errors, and I was getting a specific one this time, because we've gotten them before, but on OBS, it was telling me I got like a AVI something, and it was specifically saying that we were not permitted to run live streams. I tried it through YouTube, it wouldn't work. I tried uploading videos, it wouldn't work. And so on Wednesday, we had nothing on this channel, and that was because of false copyright strikes that were claimed. And while they were false, and we are currently getting them contested right now, it still has made me a lot more cautious about infringing on copyrights, because, for example, if they were not false and I had actually infringed on someone's copyright, I would be in trouble, because those copyright strikes would stand for 90 days and I can't even really refute them, because what would I do? Say it's not his material? It would be at that point. So with that, unfortunately, I cannot show the video, and I hope that kind of explains our little copyright conundrum in a way, because I know that a lot of people out there don't really understand the severity of a copyright law, because copyright gives a lot of free reign. For example, looking at this map and me talking, if someone on YouTube took a piece of this video, cut out about 1 minute to 2 minutes of it, YouTube tells me immediately, hey, this guy took like some of your video, and it makes up this percentage of his video. Do you want to take action against them? They give us a special little tab on our channel to do that. And so as soon as you do something like that, the copyright holder will know, because everything I do on this channel is copyrighted. Everything I say, pretty much, even if you take it and reuse it, unless if it's under fair use, you could get in trouble for it, much like we could doing that with other people. So sadly, it kind of restricts us on doing things. And I know that a lot of people are also going to say, yeah, like something about but it's fair use, and there's React channels out there, and React channels are running a very thin tightrope, but we'll cover that another time. And so with that, we're now moving on out of this question segment and into our last segment of news for the night. It looks like actually we're right on time. So with that, we're now moving.
Wait, did we cover any questions from the segment?
No, we didn't actually. So let's move on to the
I was
first
about to
question of
say.
the night.
All right, so moving on to our first super chat, we have a $20 donation from Compound David, who is a longtime channel supporter, who says, Pizza Fund low for any Gorbachev-approved pizza. And he puts in the pizza emoji.
Hey, well, I thank you so much for the support, and I do enjoy pizza. Sadly, I don't like Pizza Huts, you know, because it's very greasy. Like they just pull out like that can of like Insta grease and they just spray it on top of the pizza. And while some people like grease on their pizza, I honestly like my pizzas grease free for the large part. It just makes it taste better to me. So with that, I do thank you for the support. I won't have Gorbachev's greasy pizza, but I will have Papa John's pizza, because Papa John's pizza is pretty good pizza, although they've had some quality issues. I've eaten 30 pizzas in the last 40 days. But anyways, with that, thank you so much once again for the support, and we will make sure to get some Gorbachev pizza. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Justice Ryan, who says, when will the Senate vote? Oh, let's see here. Hold on just a minute. Okay, so it's not really political. I was just making sure, Justice Ryan. So no offense to you, but anyways, just have to check them all. He says, when will the Senate vote, or do they already on that $1 billion pledge that the president announced on Monday? And when it's approved, when will it be in Ukraine?
Unfortunately, I don't know a lot of information about the votes in the Senate on the next spending package for Ukraine, but I would hope that it will pass. Of course, providing constant support to Ukraine is crucially important, especially now that they're beginning a counterattack over most areas of the front line, because that consumes an exorbitant amount of supplies as compared to a defensive. So with that, I think that we should really start to ramp it up, and hopefully the Senate will vote on it, approve it, and that package will be on its way incredibly soon. Most likely, hopefully, the best timetable, in my opinion, would be at least within a month. So with that, I hope that does answer the question. I'm sorry I don't have a lot of exact information on it. I usually stay out of American politics as much as I can. The only time I ever cover anything from the United States is when something's finalized and the package is being sent on its way. So unfortunately, I don't know a lot about that in the meantime. But with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. And also, another thing that I've wanted to do is I've wanted to talk about on videos, like videos that are not associated with the stream, talk about United States bureaucracy and its agencies that are involved. Because one thing that a lot of people don't know about is that there are loads of U.S. agencies that do all kinds of different things in the country, and nothing is ever straightforward. And a lot of people think it is, but once you start going under the surface, it really isn't. Like, for example, Nevada, the state of Nevada only controls, and I bet you won't believe this, Matthew, they only control about 17% of the land within their borders. The remainder of it is federal land.
Yeah, I believe that. So you got a bunch of military stuff out there.
Yeah, what's crazy, what's not, actually, let me show you this. The parts of Nevada that are in the state's jurisdiction. Let me see here. Let me pull this up. Nevada. Oh, come on. I want to show the federal land. Where's the federal land? Dang it. Federal land in Nevada. Map. Yeah, we want the map. Images. Actually, here's a really interesting one. This one shows federal land across the entire United States. And oh my god, look at Nevada. The whole thing is owned by the federal government. The state of Nevada doesn't have a lot of jurisdiction within their own borders. Like the state troopers of Nevada are only able to exercise their authority within the areas that are not federal land, interestingly enough. And so, for example, on this map, which I think shows it a little bit better, you can see that most of the state's actually controlled by the federal government and not the state of Nevada. And it's insane to see this kind of stuff because it kind of puts into picture who out there really controls the stuff. And you can see that the Bureau of Land Management controls most of the land in Nevada. And I know this is way off Ukraine, but it's still stuff in the United States that keeps me awake at night, and I would love to make in a video because...
Oh.
Huh?
And Enforcer, I was actually wrong. It looks like most of the state is controlled by the Bureau of Land Management, and only a small portion is actually the Department of Defense. So I'm wondering if that's the free access like lands that they have out there. I don't know much about like how they control the land out west, but I know there's like lands that are like public use. That may be what that is.
Yeah, that's actually a great question, and I think it would make a very interesting video to explain federal land and how it works. Because you can see that what's interesting is that you can tell where westward expansion happened in the United States because the areas farther east have almost no federal land within them. But the farther west you go, like, of course, during I guess you could say, the time of the pioneers and the cowboys, the federal government just gave out land to settlers, and you can see the areas that got further west, the areas that less people went to, the more they just kept the land, and then they never gave it over to the states, and they still control it to this day. Not getting political or anything in here, but because this is just a statement of fact in the United States, but it's one of the most interesting things that no one covers. It's almost as interesting as the Department of Energy maintaining our nuclear arsenal. So with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little tidbit of news and a little bit about the United States, and I hope some of our international viewers may have found that a little bit interesting. And I think in the future, I would like to make that into a video. I watch a lot of CGP Grey stuff, and he's already kind of made a video on it, but I enjoy it so much, and I find the topic so interesting, I would like to tackle it in my own video at some point. So with that, we're now on to the next question, and thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and the final one of this segment goes to More Mool, who puts in a $15 donation, but does not leave a comment. But thank you very much for your support of the channel. And that is our last super chat of the segment. So, Enforcer, do you have anything you want to add on that last one?
Yes, I would love to thank you so much for the support because it helps out this channel a great deal. Y'all don't know how much it does help us out. And also, buying our shirts. They help us out a lot. And we got a limited edition run going on right now. And please make sure to get one because the more y'all get Lee Spring Army merch, which, of course, that honey badger, I'm kind of thinking of it being the official symbol of the Lee Spring Army. Once again, I will always want to give credit to 6022 by 1023rd for giving us that. That was wonderful of you, and I thank you so much once again. I'm kind of considering that the official mascot, the official emblem, pretty much, of the Lee Spring Army at this point. And so with that,
I think it should be.
I think it should be. I love it a lot, and honestly, something I was thinking about, Matthew, something to throw through our design board, which is just you.
Just me. I'm the whole design board.
Is to take.
Although this time our design was kind of outsourced to 10. I forget the whole number. What is it, Enforcer?
It's 6022 by 1023rd.
Yes, we kind of outsourced this time. So all credit to that artist.
And also another thing I'd like to add to throw this through the design board, Matthew, is taking the honey badger, holding the Lee Spring, and then take the LSA and combine them.
Now that would be pretty cool. I think.
That would be pretty cool. I think that may be what we're moving towards with our permanent store item with the honey badger on it, because I think that would be really cool. Anyways, with that, we've talked about it too much, and it's time for us to move on into our next segment of news, starting off at the Enerhodar plant. Now, I have to show you all this, and before we start, I have to say this. The Russians claim these guys are dead, but this is a fake video. I'll explain why, and just for the future, I want YouTube to know this is not showing dead bodies. It's not. These people are alive, and I'm about to go through the efforts of proving that they are, and that this is an incredibly fake Russian video. According to the Russians, the Ukrainian force landed on the shores near the Enerhodar nuclear power plant, and they were able, with the use of their air force and also their army, to take them out once they landed on the beach. Now, if you'll take a look at this video, we're going to start noticing a lot of problems with the story and a lot of problems with what they're showing us here. Now, starting off, we've got one Ukrainian right here. Supposedly, remember, this is supposedly.
11 часов по московскому времени, а у нас уже
Now, there's that voice again.
Yeah. Notice this guy. Now, let's look at the start of that video again. There's the water right there. And supposedly this attack happened yesterday. Tides rise and fall. And considering that this is midday, I would assume that the tide is about as far out as it could be. And this guy is dry as a bone. There's not a single bit of water or moisture on this guy or his
У
clothes.
нас уже кто-то устал.
Also, what did he, if he supposedly died, what did he die from? There's not even a bullet hole, there's no blood. This is literally just a guy who's dressed up like a Ukrainian and is laid down on this beach for the video.
34.
Like, look, the guy's laying out comfortably. He's even rested his head on his arm. This guy is fake. He's taking a nap. Look at this guy. He's laying like it's a baby crib or something. Like he's got a little mattress. This is the fakest video I've ever seen. There is no visible wounds on any of them. And if you're and there's no signs that there's any damage to the beach, driftwood is just laying around. You don't see any charring, any mortar round explosions, artillery explosions, or anything like that. It's just, it's all fake.
35. Тридцать шесть. Сука, блин. Пидорас, блин. 37. Десант хуй.
Now this one is the worst one right here. This guy is taking the reenactor death pose right here. I've done this pose when dying and reenacting. A lot of people do this pose because it's comfortable. Honestly, I sleep in bed like that. And also the freaking stupidest thing about it, you can see that there's still color in his hand. If he was dead, there would be no color. This guy's got the exact same complexion on his hand as I do when I'm alive. And I love something else that's always interesting about this. If you were pushing on a beach and got killed, wouldn't the pistol still be in your hand instead of neatly placed just a few feet away from you? Isn't that kind of weird? Isn't this all a little too weird?
30.
Also, I love this one because somehow by just pure coincidence, this guy's face was completely covered in seaweed. And if you'll notice, they don't show any of their faces because they're alive, and you would be able to tell that these guys are Russians dressed up as Ukrainians faking it in this video.
8.
Now they're going to show you the perfectly clean weapons that came right out of an arsenal or were just cleaned right before this video. And now we can see passports. Look at that. And for some reason, soldiers of Ukraine in Ukraine are carrying around passports. Isn't that kind of odd? I don't know about you, Matthew, but I don't really carry around my U.S. passport when I go to college daily.
Yeah, that is weird.
And another thing, how in the hell were these passports supposedly on Ukrainians that probably, according to the story, would have jumped off of a boat into water, and there's no evidence of them shriveling up or having any kind of water damage. These things are dry as a bone, like they were driven in a car, and they took them out and said, we're going to use these in the video. Oh yeah, by the way, look at the crisp $100 bills. Those things are so freaking crisp, they've never been in a pocket before. Look at that.
Wait, those are American $100 bills, though.
Yeah, those are American $100 bills. And my question is, why the hell would a Ukrainian carry around a $100 bill like that's legal tender in Ukraine?
Yeah, seriously.
This is the fakest whole gamut that I've ever seen from a single Russian video ever. The Ukrainians on the beach were fake. Not a single one of them was wounded. They were all laying out comfortably so that way they could sit there for the video. These things are so crisp, you might as well have gotten them straight out of the Federal Reserve. Oh my god. These people put no effort into it. At least crumple the $100 bills. For the love of God, make it believable. These people are stupid. And also the phone.
Now look, that is a lot of money considering the value of the ruble at the moment. That is a ton of money laying right there.
Let's try and count them up real quick, actually. You and me. I'll take the right stack, you take the left one, and we'll try and count them up. Are you done?
There has to be probably about 15 on my side.
Okay, so there's about $900 on my side. So that's about what you call it? 20. Nope. Let me add that up.
Quick maths.
Quick maths. Let me add that up real quick. 1,500 plus 900, 2,400 US dollars sitting right here in crisp $100 bills straight out of the bank. Now let's translate that to both rubles and hryvnias. Rubles to dollars. So we got 2,400. Let's put that in. 2,400. Wait, we did that wrong. 2,400 US dollars is 144,659 Russian rubles. God, that's actually a lot of Russian rubles. Now let's translate that to a Ukrainian hryvnia. So,
and everybody's saying those bills are too straight and clean to be real dollars. And yeah, they kind of did actually. They had absolutely no like crinkles in them or anything at all. It's like fresh out of the bank, or actually fresh off the copier, more like it.
And real quick, 2,400 US dollars is equivalent to 88,645 hryvnias, or Ukrainian yearly income average, or about twice the amount that a Ukrainian would make yearly in Ukraine. So I'm kind of on the fence, thinking that a Ukrainian soldier would be carrying around more money in their pocket than they would make annually, most likely. That seems a little bit of a stretch to me, and not only that, hopping off into water with this money in their pocket, and the stuff comes out dry, and not only dry, but crisper than coming right off the press. All this is fake. That's the whole entire point of showing this video, is that this is the fakest video I've ever seen come from the Russians so far, and it shows you that they're desperate to try and show that the Ukrainians are having a bad time in some way. Moving on from that video and on to the next, y'all may have seen yesterday those missiles come down onto the Enerhodar nuclear power plant, or the bombs. We're not really sure what kind of explosive it was. A Russian today gathered all of the IAEA inspectors around the crater and then told them, you see, it looked like it come from our side because Ukrainian missile fly over power plant and then you do a U-turn and fly down. And you can actually see this guy, even if you don't understand Russian, he's flinging up all the hand signals to show the U-turn and everything. So here's the video. Here's the Russian. Like, he literally does a U-turn hand signal. He's like, the missile did U-turn mid-air and came back this way. Oh my god. Now, Matthew, you know they're making up a really bad story because there's always a good question out there as to whether the Ukrainians or the Russians are the ones actually bombarding the plant, because it does make a little bit of sense for the Ukrainians to try and take out Russian military targets there. Also, it's incredibly dangerous. But at the same time, seeing this Russian guy literally explain the missile took a U-turn, it was fired by the Ukrainians, took a U-turn, and that's why it flew in from the Russian direction, that's really far-fetched. And that really throws in a lot of questions. Are the Russians really doing this? And considering how bad that lie is, without a doubt, it's the Russians that are the ones shelling the power plant, and they're at the power plant. That shows you it is a false flag, and the Russians are really stretching it to try and come up with a believable story. And so that's the end of the video. And this is that's the craziest crap I've ever seen. I guess this guy doesn't get how an unguided MLRS rocket works, but they usually don't do U-turns. They just kind of fly in a line. So with that, we're now going to be leaving the Enerhodar nuclear power plant, and I'm also going to be leaving y'all with fewer brain cells because of that video, and I'm very sorry about that. But with that, we're now moving on to the middle area in between Nikopol and Enerhodar, where we saw some missiles being shot down over the Dnipro River.
Вот и пизда нам.
We can see the missile
Пизда.
get shot down.
Свет выключи.
Incredibly interesting to see, and I gotta say, it's good to see that Russian missiles are being shot down over the Dnipro River. And so with that, now that we've covered all the news from this area, it's time to move on to the area where the Russians are making the full retreat, from what we've heard, and where things are apparently going poorly. Now, I would like to preface this by saying Due to the ongoing situation and the media blackout in the area and us trying to respect operational security of Ukrainian forces and their operations in the area, I cannot confirm that the Russians are in full retreat. We have heard reports initially that the Russians are in full retreat in the area. Apparently, they are being pushed back by the Ukrainians as we speak. We have no idea how far they've been pushed back, and we have no idea how bad the situation really is for them. All we can do is go off of the hearsay on this one, because otherwise we would have to go off of straight up hardcore facts, which is something that we are not allowing ourselves to do due to the situation. So with that in mind, the Russians, as far as we've heard, are in full retreat in this area. However, all we saw today was that the Ukrainians blasted away some Russian positions outside of Viskapilia. And we might actually be able to find that very distinct looking building near Viskapilia if we take a look to see where the Russians were. And that's it. We found it. There it is. So apparently the Russians are on the southern side of Viskapilia still in this warehouse, and the Ukrainians, of course, took it out today. Now, that's one thing I will do, because there are no Ukrainian forces in this video, and it doesn't give away their location. However, I will gladly give away the position of Russian forces on film. The Ukrainians begin to slam this ammunition depot with artillery, and that one actually looked like it may have got something there. It did, actually. A fire is now broken out. An explosion has happened. And that's what Putin's head looks like when he hears that the Russians have lost for the 192nd day in a row. We can now see another artillery shell exploding further down the building. And the fire continues to rage as it destroys more Russian arms and munitions that have been held within this building. That's the end of the video, and one thing I would love to point out to all of y'all about the building here is that this actually follows the rules of a building that we would mark as an ammunition depot. We haven't marked any ammunition depots or supposed ammunition depots since we've come back from the copyright strike, but this does have all the tenets of one that we would have marked on our Morse code messages. It has two large buildings that look conducive for trucks to be loaded and offloaded, and then it also has a decent amount of room to hold supplies. And so both of those things are the criteria that we look for to claim it was an ammunition depot, and we can see that the Ukrainians largely go off of that rule of thumb when attacking these buildings, because obviously the Russians aren't going to store their ammunition in 10 different houses along one road. They're much more going to pick a more warehouse-like building where all the supplies can be gathered up into one spot, and the, I guess you could say, distribution and gathering of supplies can be a lot more efficient and easier. That is one of the shortcomings of a modern military, and that's also one of the shortcomings of war in general, is that the places you keep supplies are usually kind of obvious for pretty good reasons. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Viskapilia area, and we're now going to be moving down to the area of Davidibrid, where we saw today that the Russians were hit heavily. When you see a lot of Russians right here with their armored personnel carriers, looks like BMPs, and they're gone. The artillery starts coming down in a massive sheet on the Russians, most likely taking out a lot of them from the shrapnel, and making sure that they will have no chance to fight back against the Ukrainians. With that, that's the end of the video, and it is great to see that the Russians have gotten plastered by the counterfire. With that, we're now going to be moving on into our next segment of news further down the front and in Novokakhovka. Not actually in Novokakhovka, it's actually on the little town to the north of Novokakhovka on the other side of the dam, which I'll show you right here. This little town, I'd pretty much call it Novokakhovka, honestly, but it's called Kozatsky. And we saw that today it had a pretty decent little fire and explosion going on there as another ammunition dump has been hit, this time on the northern side. It's a nice, thick, rolling smoke. And that's the end of the video. Not only that, we can actually see the HIMARS missiles coming into the town earlier in the morning that would lead to the ammunition depot having a fire and exploding. When you see the air defenses trying to shoot down the HIMARS missiles, but we can see them also exploding in the distance, showing that those air defenses were not successful at all. And so with that, we're now going to be moving out of Novikakhovka, and from that good news, and we're now going to be moving further up the line towards the area of Chakine. We're not really sure if this is the exact area where this happened, but we did see that the 45th Artillery was shelling Russians in the Kherson area. We can see the 45th taking a good look at the Russians down low, and we can see that they found a Pozici Ruchi, I believe. Rusni, I believe. I'm not really sure. I can't pronounce Cyrillic incredibly well. But the artillery fire is now coming down. Hey, Ronnie Fitz here.
Really?
Yeah, he just threw in a super chat. Hey, Ronnie, what's up? He just have had a surprise visit. And we can see the artillery is still coming down. All around. That one appears to have hit a vehicle. We can now see fires billowing out of several areas with thick black smoke rolling off of them, which is usually the black smoke of death. And we all know that that leads to vehicles being destroyed, and we can see the remains of one right there that appears to be a BTR of a kind, a BTR-60 or a BTR-82. Both vehicles have been destroyed, and we can see right here that this one is an armored car, most likely. With that, that's the end of the video, and it's great to see that the 45th Artillery Brigade is still knocking out Russian forces all across the front line, especially in the Kherson area, but of course, we can't say exactly where. While that marker does show it being in a specific area, one thing I would love to disclaim to everyone that rather than the Viscapilia marker tonight, all of these other markers are just approximated locations. They may be nowhere close to where these actually happen, and of course, we are not going to disclose for at least the foreseeable future what exactly Ukrainian forces are doing in the area, unless if the Ukrainians give us that information exactly from the government. With that, we're now going to be moving behind the lines where we saw that a Danish M113 was captured by the Russians. Now, one thing I'll have to say, and of course, this sounds a little bit like a caveat, but I did say this long before this ever happened. The M113s are rather old, and they're not, I guess you could say, the best thing on the field anymore. If you look at one of these things, they're just an armored box, and they're hardly armored at that. I'll show them to y'all real quick. These things actually used to make up the bulk of American armored personnel carriers back in Vietnam, and also, I guess you could say, all the way up until the Gulf War, which is when they started to get phased out by and large at that point, and then replaced by Bradleys, although some of them would be around for the invasion of Iraq in 2003 as well, and I think some of them would continue on service for a little bit longer, at least in the Army or the Marine Corps. I'm not exactly sure. Don't quote me on that. But still, the M113s are really just the Western equivalent of an MTLB. And so, while it is a capture, and it is something that we could see on film, it isn't the most impressive, brightest, and shiniest thing that the Ukrainians could have lost, and it may have been lost due to technical difficulties, considering that it looks like it's entirely intact. Technical difficulties? What the hell am I talking about? Is it like an engine breakdown or something like that?
Первый образец М113.
And yes, it's not garbage. The M113 is pretty decent, but at the same time, it's, you know, it's not going to be the most impressive thing you see on the field. It's not a BTR-4. It's not, let me think of some other transports. It's not, I mean, like, honestly, when you really think about it, an MRAP can do the job of an M113. It can also have a 50 caliber mounted onto it, and I believe it can carry, I think an MRAP would carry less troops, depending on the certain kind, but still, it's not that bad, but it's not as major a loss as one would think.
Малютка. Отойди, Горец. Горец. Отойди оттуда.
Epic Scorpion says probably like 6 years old, and I wouldn't doubt that. M113s are largely vintage across the world at this point. And Ronnie actually told us the M113s are still rolling, which is good to know. I wasn't sure if they were or weren't. I'm guessing that the Marines... Let me actually... Let's look at that information real quick. I need to find out who's using the M113 still. Because we know it's the Marines, but what variant? Let's see here. In service 1960 to present. That's true. We can actually see one here in Bavaria. Really cool. And I bet you they had a lot of fun driving that thing around in Bavaria. Anyways, we're going to be moving on from that. Also, Matthew, you're going to love this. Here's an M113 prototype.
That thing's like a box with tracks on it.
It's literally a box. And then they evolved into the T117, which is a box. And then finally...
Very slight evolution on that one.
Yeah. And then finally, we can see some of the more... Wait a minute, hang on. The more, I guess you could say, modern variants of the M113. This one was... this picture was taken in Iraq in November of 2008. So we could see that they were still in service then. Jeez. Wow, that's a... God, honestly, that looks like a BMP nearly, how they've upgraded that one. Or a BMD, it kind of looks like one. Anyways, let's scroll on down and let's get the exact information on these M113s. We can also see Israeli M113s. They use them a lot to this day, I believe, as far as I know. I don't really know a lot about the M113s beyond the Gulf War, so let me just get down here and let's see. These current operators... The United States operates 5,000 M113A2s and M113A3s. I thought they were the M113A3. So I'll show y'all that one real quick. The M113A3, which is the best version of the M113, I guess you could call it. So I'll show y'all the pictures. And hell, it looks like a... Gee. Well, I imagine them looking a little bit different than normal M113, but guess not. So anyways, that's an M113, folks. It's just a rolling box. Anyways, with that, we're going to get back to this video. See them giving us a good tour of it.
Патронами. Пулемет, получается, забрали, да? Короб для пулемета оставили.
And so that's the end of the video. And while it is unfortunate to see that the 113 was lost, one thing I will say is that while it is a decent armored personnel carrier, it does its job. At the same time, it's like the Ukrainians capturing MTLB. While it's great that they did it, it's not going to be changing the entire war in favor of Russia. So with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can then see some Ukrainian helicopters firing off rockets somewhere, we're assuming in Kherson. Here's the video. We can now see a little bit of a montage of the helicopter flying incredibly low over the fields and the trees. We can now see the first Mi-8 tilting up and firing off its unguided rockets, and we now see this helicopter that's filming also tilting up and firing off its unguided rockets as well. Always cool to see. It's now probably popping those chaff and flares. Got to make sure I say that correctly. And we now see them getting out of there, I'm assuming, flying back over the fields incredibly low, and it was taken on GoPro. The plug for GoPro there in the middle of a war. And so with that, that's the end of that video, and we're now going to be moving on to our last video of the Kherson front, where we can then see Russian tanks being destroyed pretty decently by the 35th Marine Brigade. You can see the Russian tanks rolling along the tree line. They've now been outlined with red boxes, just so that way we can see them as best we can. The Ukrainian artillery is now beginning to fire at the Russian tanks. And we now see on drone that one of those shells appears to have hit one of the tanks dead on. We now see the drone looking down into the field. And one of them is definitely smoking. And so with that, that's the end of the video. And remember, kids, smoking kills. And Russians' favorite brand of cigarettes is Lucky Strikes. And so with that, That's the end of our news from the Kherson area, and unfortunately, we don't have a lot to talk about here, of course, due to the media blackout and the request of silence, pretty much. We want to make sure to respect that on this channel as much as we can, and make sure that we, in our very small way, can help to make sure that no information spreads about exactly what the Ukrainians are doing and keep as many soldiers safe as possible. We will be running a fundraiser this Sunday as per usual, and just in case y'all did not know, I have reached out to the operator himself, and I'm seeing if he will come on stream this Sunday. Maybe he can, maybe he can't, we'll see. So with that, we're now moving out of the Kherson area, and we've actually covered all of the news for the night, except for one. Don't leave yet. I just remembered this one. This is actually probably the saddest one. So I'll start off with a little bit more of a somber tone on this one. The Russians appear to be running out of men to throw into this war. And they're needing new men. So they're using a disfigured man, disfigured from this very war, to help them recruit new soldiers. So with that, I'm going to show you all this very sad scene in Russia of them using a wounded man to try and recruit new soldiers. So here's the video.
Дорогие друзья, сегодня у нас в гостях легендарный Гаджи Ибрагим Халил, который принимал самое активное участие в специальной военной операции, показал себя исключительно с положительной стороны, награжден орденом мужества Российской Федерации и ему присвоено звание Героя Дагестана. Ибрагим Халил сегодня с нами рядом. Пожалуйста, ребята, берите с таких парней пример. Обращайтесь в военные комиссариаты для отбора на военную службу по контракту. Ибрагим Халил, пожалуйста, пару слов. Можешь обратиться к нашим землякам.
Дорогие братья, поступайте на контрактную службу. Приходите в военкомат, становитесь в ряды нашими братьями, которые защищают нашу Родину, интересы нашей страны, цели безопасности и мира над нашей головой. Нам необходимо устранить и уничтожить этих нацистов. Наши братья, которые на передовой воюют и защищают нас, их надо будет поддержку им дать. Так что мы ждем вас и надеемся, что вы нас не подведете.
Спасибо. Спасибо, Ибрагим Халил. Тебе здоровья крепкого. Держись, духом не упал, не падай, молодец. С тебя, в том числе наши ребятишки, будут брать пример. Спасибо.
Wait, did that guy just give a Z Heil? What
I'm
the
not sure
hell?
what that was. Wow, that's questionable.
World? That's questionable, folks. I think he just outed himself right there. Anyways, this
I'm just saying real quick, who would feel inspired to join up after watching this video? I mean, that is like the complete reason not to.
Yes, it is. They didn't even give a reason that this guy is Valorant or anything. They just advertised him off of his injury, and I don't think anyone really finds it a selling point to go into the military to get disfigured and injured. Usually they want to, like achieve some kind of a higher goal, some kind of glory or something like that. I've never really seen any soldier say, oh boy, I would love to come back from this war missing legs or maybe a cheekbone or something, because that would really be cool. I've never really seen anyone say that. And if they do, maybe they need to be checked out. And so I don't know what in the world this recruitment pitch is supposed to be, because I think this would actually stop people from joining the military than from joining it. And so with that, that's the end of this video, a really sad one at that. And now we have covered all of the news from the war in Ukraine today. I thank you all so much once again for coming back and watching this news. It has been an absolute pleasure to report it to y'all, and so without further ado, here's the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky to round out our nightly news segment.
Здоров'я, шановні українці. Сьогодні провів ще одне на цьому тижні засідання Ставки Верховного Головнокомандувача. Були присутні, як завжди, керівники сектору оборони, безпеки, Залужний, Монастирський, Буданов, Малюк, Данілов і інші. Доповідали командуючі оперативних напрямків Сирський, Літвінов, Ковальчук. Думаю, що всі ви розумієте, які основні питання прийняті і певні рішення. Я думаю, ми їх всі побачимо. Розглянули сьогодні також питання забезпечення наших військових всебічної підтримки Збройних сил України. Провів нараду щодо подальших кроків держави у європейській інтеграції. Це ще один наш оперативний напрямок роботи, щоденної важливої роботи. Для нас рух України в Євросоюз, трансформація всередині нашої країни – це те, що є одним з ключових елементів довгострокового захисту держави, гарантію свободи для усіх українців. Тому євроінтеграційний процес заслуговує не просто окремої уваги до політичних, економічних, соціальних, правових аспектів, а цілісного підходу. Рухаючись до Європи, ми посилюємо українське національне життя в цілому. Впевнений, що Україна стане повноправним членом ЄС. Принаймні, зробимо все для цього. Взяв участь сьогодні у роботі важливого форуму в Італії, один з найвпливовіших економічних форумів Європи, форум Амбразетті. Подякував прем'єр-міністру Драгі, усім італійцям, які допомагають нам, також захищають українські прагнення до свободи, до Європи. Запропонував нові напрямки співпраці між нашими державами вже зараз, після нашої перемоги. Для України важливо зберегти і посилити італійську підтримку попри будь-які зміни політичних настроїв. До речі, цього тижня це було вже друге звернення до суспільства Італії після звернення до учасників і гостей Венеційського кінофестивалю. Ми боремось за підтримку і розуміння України в усіх країнах Європи, в усіх аудиторіях європейських суспільств. Щоразу я нагадую, що захист України – захист усієї Європи, не тільки наш, усього демократичного світу. Саме з цієї точки зору варто розглянути погодження сьогодні країнами Великої Сімки рішення щодо обмеження ціни на російську нафту. Коли цей механізм буде реалізований, він стане вагомим елементом захисту цивілізованих країн, енергоринків від російської гібридної агресії. І дійсно треба обмежити також ціну на російський газ. Вдячні пані Урсулі фон дер Ляєн, яка сьогодні сказала про це. Давно настав час саме таких енергетичних санкційних кроків проти Росії. Санкції, які не лише обмежать потік нафтодоларів, газу євро в Москву, але й важливо відновлять справедливість для усіх європейців, яких Росія намагається шантажувати штучно, роздутою ціною на енергетичному ринку. Підписав черговий указ про нагородження наших воїнів. 166 учасників бойових дій відзначено державними нагородами, із них 44 посмертно. Вічна пам'ять усім, хто віддав життя за Україну. Вічна слава усім нашим воїнам, які б'ють окупантів всюди, на українському напрямку, на нашій землі. Харківський напрямок, Донеччина, Донбас, увесь Південь, Крим, всюди є і буде Україна. І тільки, і буде свобода, і тільки, і буде Європа. Ми ніколи не віддамо свого окупантам. Слава Україні!
Well, that's the end of President Zelensky's speech. But before we move on from it, some people have been asking, why is he so quiet? It seems like he's not trying to wake people. I think he's doing this speech in some kind of an office or a cantina or something. Because if y'all hear at the beginning, there's like the sound of like forks and plates clinging together. And I think he's somewhere where there's other people. And it's actually really respectable of him, you know, considering he's the president of Ukraine. He could talk as loud as he wants, pretty much. But he's, excuse me, God, I choked on my spit.
And Forcer's dying over there.
Yeah, he's, the Russians got me, but he's respecting the people around him. He's making sure to be pretty quiet while he's addressing a nation in war. So I gotta respect him for that. I like that he is respecting folks around him. And also, I would, of course, I don't want him to say where he is, but I would like to know at the end of the war where he is in these videos, because it was kind of weird to hear that little plate clinging at the very beginning of the video. Anyways, with that, that rounds out our day 192 summary of the news, and it has been an absolute pleasure to report it to each and every one of y'all. If y'all have enjoyed, please make sure to subscribe. We do enjoy people subscribing, and also it lets y'all know when we run videos and streams. We are going to be trying, just to let y'all know, because Matthew and me have agreed on doing this today, we are going to be making something on Monday, which will air at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, like a normal stream. It's going to be that video premiere format, and if y'all do enjoy it, we may start to see about making a bit of a hybrid in between our live streams and those videos, and kind of interchanging them if a lot of people enjoy them. So anyways, with that, I thank you all so much once again for watching. I hope y'all are around for Monday to see that little bit of news. And so with that, we're now moving on into the question segment, where we're going to answer all of the questions that have been thrown in tonight, super chats, and as many live chats as we can. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, folks, and moving into our final question segment of the stream. Up first, we have two polls to address. And the first one asked, should the honey badger become the official mascot of the LSA? It looks like 62% of you said yes, 26% said I'm undecided, and 11% said no. So yes is the winner. So guess what? The honey badger is now the official mascot of the LSA.
And let's go. I really like the honey badger, honestly. I think it's a really cool animal. And not only that, it's a really cool symbol of our Leaf Spring Army. Once again, to pull it up again, and I have to say, I am just over the top with the style, the design, everything. Coolest thing I've ever seen put on merchandise, except for our main channel. I'm just kidding. Actually, it's really cool. And I just really like it a lot. It's my favorite. So with that, I just love the thing. That's why I got every single one of these, because on some limited edition runs, I'll just get a shirt or I'll get a mug or something. This time I got them all because I really like it. I love it. And so I just can't wait to get them all. I actually got a couple of stickers so that way I can hand them out to some people I know in college, because some people actually know who I am in person, surprisingly enough, and what I do, which was kind of a mistake. Because the first day, to tell you all this funny story, the first day I went to class at the college I go to, someone sat there and said, gee, I ought to shout out my TikTok channel, to everyone in this class, because it's like a lecture hall of like 100 or 200 people. And I said, oh man, I had to shout out my YouTube channel. He just know like it's a joke to him. And he said, oh, you have a YouTube channel? How many subscribers do you have? And I was like, I don't know, like 94, 95. He's like, oh my God, you're a celebrity. And I was like, no, I'm not. And then he was like, what channel is it? And of course, at that point, it would feel rude to just tell him, I'm not telling you. So I told him, and then he told everyone pretty much. And so whenever I walk in there, like half of this lecture hall is like, hey, what's up, Enforcer? And I'm like, what in the world? So I'm like, this is weird. So I'm going to hand out a couple of stickers to him because I think that would be kind of nice. But still, I love the honey badger, and it is going to become one of the official symbols of this Leaf Spring Army going forward. And I'm glad a lot of you all support that as well. And so with that, do we have any other polls?
So we actually do have one more poll, and the second one said, who do you think is actually shelling near the nuclear power plant? It looks like 79% said Russia, 15% said both, and 4% said Ukraine. So an overwhelming majority believe that Russia is indeed the one shelling near the nuclear power plant. But Enforcer, do you have any thoughts to add?
I think the Russians are shelling towards the nuclear power plant. Now, I'm going to be honest with y'all. Matthew and me have discussed who is really shelling the power plant, because while we've heard that the Russians are, it would make sense for the Ukrainians to shell around the power plant as long as they're not directly onto it. But considering the story that we got today from that Russian, literally watching him go, "He made a U-turn," that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen, and that completely threw out any doubt I had in the window that about the whole entire situation. That is 100% the Russians and what they're doing. I mean, watch that video again and tell me that this guy is not full of it and just trying to come up with something. This is like something you would see in a comedy routine. Just watch the hand motions and everything. It's very simple, Inspector. The missile does U-turn. Oh my God. You can't make it up. And if the Russians were being honest, because apparently that rocket has landed in the ground in the direction showing it came from Russia's side of the front, he wouldn't have to lie. He would just show, see, the rocket came in from across the Dnipro reservoir, therefore the Ukrainians launched it. Instead, he has to come up with some cockamamie story that an unguided rocket turned itself around mid-air and landed at the power plant, which is absolute BS. And that makes me think for sure that it's the Russians that are bombarding that power plant. So with that, I hope that addresses the question, and I will be honest with y'all, analysis-wise, it did make sense for the Ukrainians to do it. But considering that guy just flat out lied like that, there's no doubt it's the Russians. And so with that, we're now going to move on out of the polls. If you have anything extra to add, Matthew, to it, feel free. But if not, we'll move on to the questions.
And with that being said, as the Enforcer likes to say, we are now moving on to our live chat and super chat questions. And first up, we have to recognize that $50 super chat from Ronnie Fitt, who says, "Hi Mars 2024." And yes, indeed. And also, sadly, I believe the Enforcer told me that the Hi Mars song got copyrighted, so we can't play it anymore. So no more la 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 la.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's kind of sad, and I get it, like I can't blame them. They're making songs about the Ukrainian war they do very well, and then they put a copyright on them, and it makes sense. It's their stuff; they can do that. And I'm not gonna sit there and rat on anyone who does that, because then I would be a hypocrite. Because if someone started ripping my videos clean off YouTube and re-uploaded them as their own, I wouldn't like that either. So I do get why they're copyrighting them, sadly, but we can't play the song anymore. But I do love the song. It's a good one. We used to play it when it wasn't copyrighted. And also, Ronnie, I heard that you were over there on the Funker 530 channel backing us up and saying some good words about us during our copyright strike. And if you were, I didn't get to see it personally, but I heard a lot of people say it. I want to thank you so much for backing up the Lee Spring Army during that trying time. It was tough for us to get through. It was very tough for Matthew and me to get through. It stressed the hell out of me for 2 days straight. And now we're back. And I'm so thankful that we have so many people on our side in, I guess you could say, the war news community and also in the Ukraine war community, because a lot of people, Operator Starsky, you, Mercado, they all came up to bat for us and support us during that. And I thank you so much, because once this is all over, once the copyright strikes are lifted, I will probably go into a lot more detail about what happens, considering that it will have been resolved at that point. But I got to thank everyone once again, especially you, Ronnie, for the support that you threw into our channel tonight, and also for throwing in a good word to us, to all of your viewers, and letting them know what we were going through and spreading the word, which meant a lot to me. And I got to thank you so much for doing that for us. And so with that, thank you so much once again for being here, Ronnie. I saw you throw in a couple of jokes in the chat when I saw him. I actually sat there and was like, "Whoa, wait a minute! Did you see Matthew?" He was like, "Where's the biolabs?" And I was like, "Wait a minute!" And then right afterwards,
yes, I think I saw that.
And then right afterwards, he said, "Don't ban, please." I joke, and I was like, "Oh," I was like, "Okay," but still, thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
He said, "Bro, I didn't do nothing. Ronnie, you're safe. Don't worry." But anyways. Moving on to our next super chat, we have a $50 donation from Trademarks and Patents for Growing Businesses, and we also have another $50 donation from Trademarks as well. So he has a really long super chat. So I'm going to read them all together. He says, "This will take research. Early in the war, you estimated the daily diminishment in Russia's total supplies, particularly fuel trucks, the logistical pinch point. Could you do the same for estimated battalions and supplies in Kherson region based on battalions there before the bridges were blown, and create a daily countdown of those numbers? Slava Ukraine."
In Trademarks and Patents, I think you came up with an incredibly interesting one. I have to say, if I had to try and do like a little spread on that and figure out, I mean, how that would work, I think I'd actually have to revise that a little bit and consider that as of the current day situation, with the ferry being the only operational crossing for the Russians into the Kherson area. Considering that, and we do have pictures showing how many vehicles can be loaded onto that ferry, we can get a pretty good idea how many vehicles make it across per day. And if anyone could help us out and try and find any official figures on how long it takes for one of those ferry crossings, we could then get an idea of how much supplies are being transported across the river by that ferry, and how many supplies the Russians are getting here. Then we can try and calculate how many battalions, hopefully we can get an actual figure on that, of Russians are in that area, how much ammunition they may be using per day based off of historical figures, and then do the math on how many supplies they're consuming versus how many supplies they're receiving. Once we get that, we can get a good idea of how long the supplies will most likely last them. We don't have an idea of how many supply caches they have within this area, but you know, we'll have to take a lot of liberties trying to estimate that. But I do thank you so much for the interesting idea, Trademarks and Patents, because I do think that would be something I'm going to try and do here soon. So with that, thank you so much for the 2 super chats. Both of them were impressive, and they help us to keep this channel running. And once again, I have to say this again to everyone, y'all help us to keep this thing going. If it wasn't for the Lee Spring Army and y'all's generous support and kindness to this channel, it wouldn't be possible. And so with that, I got to thank you all wholeheartedly once again. And we are now on to the next one, and I hope that answered your question fairly well, Trademarks and Patents. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, I want to make a special mention to Trademarks, not only for his support, but also for offering his assistance during the entire schism we were having with that copyright issue. So thank you very much for offering your assistance, and it is very much appreciated. And next up...
Wait a minute. Huh? That's Matthew. Why'd you even say that? That's obvious. His name is Trademarks and Patents for Growing Businesses.
Yes, and he did offer his help.
Oh, and
So
and he helped Matthew out a lot. And I would love to point that out to everyone, that he was a massive contribution in help in the background to us during that time. And I would love to thank him for being one of the oldest members of the Lee Spring Army. If anyone could qualify for the old guard, it would be Trademarks and Patents. And I gotta thank you so much for all the help you offered us during the copyright strikes and the punishment that came from them, and also for helping us out so much tonight. And so with that, we are on to the next one. I also like to make a quick little shout out. Ronnie Fit got done with his last day of 9-to-5 work, and congratulations. Welcome to the YouTube club. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And moving on to the next one, we have a super chat from Ashley, who puts in a $20 donation, and just like Trademarks, puts in another $20 donation that continues into the second one, I do believe. Ashley says, "Good defeats evil. There was never doubt the enforcer would win. LSA prevails to help Ukraine with its ultimate triumph over evil Russia. In appreciation to everyone who worked behind the scenes to restore the enforcer's dream."
And I got to thank you so much for those kind words and support. And I've got to thank everyone involved, the Lee Spring Army, all of the other channels, Operator Starsky, Ronnie Fit, Mercado. I don't know. I didn't hear anything about Denny's, so I don't know. But I thank everyone for helping us out during that time. It was tough. I don't know why the punishments were lifted. The punishments were lifted, or otherwise we wouldn't be allowed to even be on streaming right now, because it wouldn't allow us to have that ability. So I got to say, it's kind of nuts. I don't know how in the world that happened, but as far as I can tell, let me go back and check. The strikes are still standing. I'm looking at them right now. One of them, wait a minute, hang on. Let me check this out real quick to see if that happened again. Come on. Wow, it happened again. Well, we'll have to try and work with that in the future. Anyways, both of them are still standing. One of them will probably be taken down within a couple of days because, you know, it just will. I won't get into that now. It most likely will be, though. But I got to say, it's really something to see that we were able to get back on streaming within 48 hours. And I hope that through our efforts, the combined efforts of the Lee Spring Army and the massive communities that have been backing us, we can have these copyright strikes lifted as soon as possible. There's one thing I can promise you all, is that one of them definitely fell under fair use, and the other one's in public domain because it was made by the People's Deputy of Ukraine, and made in the, I guess you could say, the role and the capacity of a government position, which, if y'all don't know, any government around the world that creates a video and a government employee that makes that video for the government, that falls into public domain immediately. There's really no question about it because it's something that the government's done. And so with that, I hope that answers that a little bit. Both of them we shouldn't have gotten a strike for, especially from someone who didn't even own the copyrighted material. So they should be lifted. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again, everyone, for your support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Sharon Tukolsky and a $10 super chat from Michelle Esquera, or Esquera, I think it's pronounced. But thank you very much to both of you, Sharon and Michelle, for your support of our channel, and thank you for helping to keep us running. And Enforcer, I know he wants to add a few words.
And I do. I want to thank both of y'all so much for helping this channel to keep on going. Of course, y'all didn't leave comments, but your support does say a lot. It says that y'all enjoy this channel and y'all want us to keep on running. And of course, I made a promise to y'all, and the only day we have broken that promise was just 2 days ago, that we would cover the news every single day of the war until this war was over. And for 192 days, we have kept that promise. And until the end of time, we will. And your support helps us to continue to do that. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Santiago Flores, who says, "Good evening, Enforcer team. I wonder who the Russians are getting their stolen loot out of the country. Nice to see you guys back as well." And Santiago, it's good to see you again. And I can't remember, but I think Santiago was here last night as well.
He was, and I gotta thank you so much, Santiago, for welcoming us back again. It is a pleasure to be back. Honestly, I have to be honest with y'all though. 2 nights of streaming, 2 nights of not streaming when I'd usually be streaming has really thrown me off my schedules, really thrown me off kilter. I don't even know what in the world's going on anymore. I'm kind of like sitting here and it feels like it's a Wednesday or a Tuesday, but it's really Friday. It really threw me off, and I really hate that. But at the same time, I'll get used to it again. It's just that it's kind of weird, honestly. Once you get thrown off a schedule like that, it just really throws you off. But I do thank you so much for the support, Santiago, and thank you so much for welcoming us back, because we are the Lee Spring Army, and we are here to stay. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have another super chat from Santiago Flores, who puts in another $10 donation. Excuse me. Who says, it was mentioned on a news discussion show that the Ukrainians had the American review their plans for the offensive. So is American involvement growing?
American involvement is pretty heavy in this war, while it's never really highly publicized. Our involvement in providing the Ukrainians with vital satellite pictures and information, as well as strategic analysis, has been going on ever since the very beginning of this war. The United States, of course, has a vested interest in Ukraine. Just in case of those of y'all who do not know, helping Ukraine win this war and eventually become a member of NATO and the European Union could potentially put United States forces, as well as the remainder of NATO forces, within 200 miles or less of the strategic city of Volgograd, which would cut the Russians off from their economic powerhouse of the Volga River. If we were able to make sure that Ukraine came into our fold, it would be of a great advantage. And also, considering that Russia is one of our rivals, it is always in our best interest to make sure that we can disadvantage our rivals any way we can. And so we've been providing as much support as possible to the Ukrainians, much like we did to the Mujahideen. In case of y'all didn't know, we actually took some of the Mujahideen that would later become the Taliban, and then, of course, the terrorists that we went over there to take out. Some of them were actually taken to the United States and trained in the Rocky Mountains. I bet you didn't know that, Matthew.
I definitely did not.
Yeah, and it's kind of wild when you think about that, because it's like, wow, we actually trained what would become our worst enemy. It's kind of like, I'm not trying to go through the gamut of mistakes that America's made, because at the time they were good decisions, but in the future, they wouldn't really be good decisions. Like the Contras. Y'all kind of know what the Contras turned into. They turned into pretty much the drug gangs that we see down in Central and South America today, and we kind of funded them so that way we could get some of our interests secured down there. But anyways, moving beyond all of those bad decisions, this one is an incredibly good one, because we are currently helping the Ukrainians to win this war, and some of that is through our strategic analysis and also the information we give them. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question in a way, because as far as we know, we've been doing that since the start, and thank you so much for the support. Also, here goes Bob. He said, I remember the president at the time getting in trouble over it, and he did. And y'all all know the story of how Oliver North took the blame for the whole thing. It's a really interesting ordeal historically. But with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Jose Urano, who says, question, aren't you aware of the new turnaround Sioux rocket in the Ukraine inventory? And if you were in Ukraine, would you use optics or trust your iron sights to get the drop on the Orkies?
Well, I thank you for the support. I have not heard about the turnaround rockets. I will try and find those someday. Maybe those are Australian rockets, because they come right back. You know what I mean? I don't know. They're sending over Bushmasters and rockets now. But to move on to that second part, if I was in Ukraine, now I'm going to sound like an idiot. I've never shot a gun with a scope on it. I've always shot iron sights. So the only thing I know how to shoot is iron sights. Now, I know it's not hard to shoot through a scope. It's kind of the same. Well, it is the same principle. The problem is I don't know how to sight in scopes or adjust them or anything like that. So I've always just kind of gone with iron sights. I can actually get out to around 200 to 300 yards away and accurately hit in a grouping of less than about a half foot. But at the same time, it takes a lot of time to get a grouping like that. You have to sit there for like a whole minute aiming the rifle before you fire to try and get a grouping like that. So honestly, in a real firefight, if I was shooting just quickly, I guess you could say the grouping of the shots would probably be much wider than me sitting there in a chair incredibly comfortably, sitting there and taking my time aiming the rifle and firing each shot. So in my opinion, considering that the average firefight occurs at a distance of 300, 400 yards, I would most likely want a optic of some kind, because that is right at the maximum range that I can shoot at with iron sights, and so I would most likely go with a scope. But once again, that's just entirely going off of my personal opinion. I don't have any combat experience to know, and I honestly have to get some to really give you an honest answer on that one. But that's still my opinion. So take it with a grain of salt. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much for the support and the interesting question. That was a really different one.
All right. And moving on to our next super chat, we have a $10 donation from WF2U, who's figured out the Morse code and says, message number 1, we will continue to fight the copyright strikes and we will win. Message number 2, if you are reading this, then you can read Morse code. Congrats. Yes, I can read Morse code and send it as well. I'm a ham radio operator.
And thank you so much for the support, WF2U. And also, thank you so much for deciphering that little Morse code. I'm glad, I bet you loved hearing that second one come through. Because you're like, oh man, I was like, that sucks. But I've actually ran out of ideas for tonight, and so I just threw out a random sentence to put at the end. But I'm glad you were able to decipher both of them. And yes, we are still going to fight those copyright strikes until they're both lifted. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, and also always being here reading off those Morse code messages. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right. And I just asked in the live chat, I said, does Ronnie Fit have a snootful? And it appears like nobody knows what a snootful means. But
well, actually, Ronnie responded with snoot.
He said snoot. He didn't know what I meant. So I said, are you plastered, LMAO? He said, nah. But anyways, moving on to our next super chat, we have a $10 donation from Richie MC, who says, look out for you, Enforcer. Your old stream still got the HIMARS song. If someone plays it for nostalgia purposes, does that violate to the copyright rule?
It does not. Oh, go ahead, Matthew.
And I would suggest, personally me, I wouldn't get too deep into that, just in case somebody shows up later and tries to claim something.
Yeah, so with that, unfortunately, I'm going to declare ignorance on that one, but thank you so much for the support, and we're on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a $10 super chat from Sweaty Chungus, who says, will you be willing to sponsor a fundraiser for LSA members to enter Ukraine for village cleanup projects where the Russians have struck? LSA could provide video footage for proof. No, trust me, bros.
Well, thank you for the support, Sweaty Chungus. I'm not really sure how we'd be able to pull that off, because if we did a fundraiser like that, I would, of course, because this is my rule, you know, I would have to have it registered in the GuideStar program so that way I can run it on YouTube. So I'm not sure, because that would probably take a lot of oversight from me to run that nonprofit. I'm not entirely sure if I would be able to do something like that, but it is a really good idea, and I will see about trying to make that a possibility in the future. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Sweaty Chungus. You've been here forever now, and I thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, I hope we answered that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from the Ghost Rider, who does not leave a comment, but thank you very much, Ghost Rider, for your support of our channel. We appreciate it very much. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Tim F, who says, should the UAF get some Mantis AA alongside the Iris T SLM? I think they could work quite well together in Slava, Ukraine.
Mantis AA. Mantis AA. Ooh, oh, I know what it is. That's that new thing.
That new thing looks pretty cool.
Let's read this name. Nachterbike Shoot System Mantis. And I read that so wrong. I read it with a Russian accent, and that's clearly German. I'm so sorry, everyone. I butchered it. But I've watched this thing in action before. There's a video of it, and it explains how it works. Oh my god, it's a beast. I will say that. I don't really know a lot about it, but it is a very cool system, and I would say that if the Ukrainians got some of these, they would probably be in a pretty good position, especially in the air defense category. Also, what in the hell is this thing? Oh, it's from a video game. It doesn't even matter.
Yeah, I was about to say, that's definitely fake.
Oh, look, they put the thing on the LAV. Oh, that's really cool. I like that. But dang, man, these things are a unit. And look how small they are. Well, maybe that might be a different version of it. Yeah, that's a different version of it for sure. But man, these things are cool. That's all I got to say. So with that, can you read off the other one real quick so we can pull it up?
And the other one was the Iris T SLM.
Iris... Oh, we've already pulled it up. Iris T SLM. Oh, wow. We've pulled it up before. I don't think I've ever looked at it a lot. This is German again. So it looks like this fellow's wanting to know the German stuff. So let's pull up this thing in particular and try and get some information about it. IRIS-T SLM. And I've heard some people whine about me using Wikipedia. Hey, I watched Real Life Lore the other day that's got like 5.7 million subscribers, and he pulled up Wikipedia stats on his video. I think Wikipedia is okay. Usually the information's pretty vetted, and you can also go down here and look at all of the sources that they use to make this article. So, and that's also what I do to find my information, is that I go on Wikipedia, I look through the sources, and then I go find them and read them, because that is, you know, firsthand true information for the most part, although there is a couple that I found that aren't. Anyways, let's go back up here. Operational range is 16 miles, and it is a short-range air-to-air missile, infrared homing, to replace the AIM-9 Sidewinder. Interesting. Any aircraft capable of firing the Sidewinder are capable of firing the IRIS-T. Interesting. So it's a, I guess you could say it's a shorter range air-to-air missile. It is, of course, replacing the AIM-9. And wow, look at that unit cost. Each one of those things costs $430,000. That is the price of 2 MTLBs, I believe. But still, it looks like it would be a pretty decent system. And so with that, I hope that answers the question in a way. I don't really know a lot about both of them, but I do have to say they look cool and they sound like they're competent. There are some of the modern leading edge technologies in their fields. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, at least in my opinion, as far as we were able to find online. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $9 super chat from *_*, which equivalates to a face looking kind of plastered, actually, if I could describe it that way. Who says, Enforcer Matt, do a poll on what countries the people in the live chat are from. And that would actually be a pretty good poll that I'll actually put up in just a moment, but it'll have to be pretty general, like down to the continent, basically, because we're only given 4 options on the poll.
No one, I don't think anyone, I don't think some people will get that. Matthew would throw down like 8 options on a poll if he could, but it only gives him 4. So, you know, we can, so, you know, some, like we would probably in a second, if we actually threw up countries, it would be like US, Canada, UK, and Australia. And then someone would be going, hey, I'm from Germany. Why didn't you throw that down? You know, or something like that. So, here, but how about this, Matthew? Because this will probably be interesting. Europe, North America, Asia in general, or Oceania. That'll include Australia and New Zealand.
So Europe, North America, Oceania, and what was the other one?
Asia.
Asia. All right, and that poll will be going up here in just a moment. Let's see. The question is, where are you from?
Where are you from? Hey, dox yourself, kids. I'm just playing. Hey, don't dox yourself.
Don't go putting your full address in the live chat, or you'll find out the crazies out there. But anyways, there's that poll. Feel free to answer it. We're from North America, obviously, so let me click that. And with that being said, we are moving on to our next super chat question, which is from John Mark Pagan Owl, who puts in a $5 donation and says TYPR in best sniper in World War I.
TYPR, best sniper in World War I. TYPR, sniper. Is it spelled TYPR?
Yes.
I can't find anything about it in particular. Let me go check through the images. Let's see if we can find a World War II era looking rifle. I can find a BB gun. I can find a bullpup sniper. Ew. Wait a minute, that's the Chinese. Ew. That's probably going to fall apart once you fling it on a wall. SVD. Wait a minute, hang on. SVD right there. Yeah, I can't find that one, sadly. But I do thank you for the support, and if you can clarify what that was, if it is that, please let us know again, and try and give us something we could pull up for it, so that we can take a good look at it. But I do thank you for the support, but unfortunately, we cannot find that right now. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from GNF, who says, why do people blame Gorbachev for the fall of the Soviet Union when Yeltsin was the one who disbanded the Union?
Well, great question. Gorbachev To explain a little bit of late Soviet history, the Soviet Union had been run by people who kept a tight control on what the press could say. And if you control the press, you can generally control the overall feelings in the public. And for the longest time, the press in the Soviet Union said everything's great, everything's fine, everything's wonderful, everything's always getting better. The yields of crops are getting better, we're making more steel, it's better steel, people's lives are improving. And whether that was really the case or not, which it was never the case, is not the point. As long as people thought things were getting better, things were getting better. However, when Gorbachev became the premier of the Soviet Union, he brought in two new social policies, perestroika and glasnost, and both of those allowed Russian citizens, well, Soviet citizens in general, a lot more liberties than they ever had before. The news could now openly criticize the Russian government for almost anything they wanted to. It actually gave the Soviet press the freedom to do it, and also it gave people in general just more rights to pretty much make public their dislike of the Soviet government. And because of that, the news immediately went from, oh, the Soviet Union is wonderful, to the Soviet Union sucks. Have you seen this? I mean, like, they literally went overnight to that. And so public dissent started to grow, and it continuously grew over the years, especially since when Gorbachev became the premier of the Soviet Union, the Afghan war had just begun, and over that time, the Soviet press was highly critical of the war and what they were doing there and didn't really like it much. And so it literally became the Soviet version of Vietnam, especially on the home front. Also due to the Chernobyl disaster, which became something that started to become publicized over the news. Believe it or not, it was actually the news that misled Gorbachev in the Soviet Union to believe that the Chernobyl disaster was not as bad as it seemed because they reported it as a small incident. And they did not, and that's because they were actually listening to plant officials who were downplaying it, much like the Fukushima Daiichi people would in 2011 at TEPCO. However, anyways, they downplayed it, so the news downplayed it, and so then Gorbachev thought it was nothing, although there was radiation leaking all over the Soviet Union. Anyways, moving through all of those small little topics and bits, this I guess you could say permission of dissent that the Soviet government under Gorbachev gave everyone at the time allowed for a political faction, I guess you could call them much more liberal than the communists were. They were wanting to democratize the country. And so it allowed them to go up to Gorbachev and say, you either step down from your position and you let Yeltsin take over, or we start a civil war. And Gorbachev, as later on you could see in his interviews, he said, I was really presented with a choice. I would either have a civil war and a nuclear power country, which would most likely result in the use of nuclear weapons and the destruction of our nation, or I could step down. And so he decided to step down. Yeltsin then took charge, and his whole entire goal of taking charge of the Soviet Union was to dismantle the thing. So I hope that I hope that kind of answers the question, because while Yeltsin dismantled it, he became the premier of the Soviet Union solely for that goal. Gorbachev was kind of the one who socially allowed the Soviet Union to have dissent for it to get to that point. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, and I hope that summarizes late Soviet history, at least the social aspects of it, somewhat well. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $7 super chat from Greg Pack, who says, what's the term in Alabama for being from Birmingham? I am from Birmingham, but in the UK, we are known as Brummies. Keep up the amazing works, lads. Your streams are easily the most informative available. Thank you, and SU. Now, honestly, I'm not sure what the term is for people in Birmingham and Alabama. I guess Birminghamers or something like that. I have no idea. But Brummies, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I've never heard that before. And also, I would have to say, if you're from Birmingham and Alabama, you just say, I'm from Birmingham. Like, that's all you say. Like, if you're from Montgomery or Mobile or Huntsville, you just say, I'm from Huntsville or I'm from Mobile. I don't know why the United States kind of has to be boring in that way. We don't really come up with creative names for people who come from cities. Like, if you're from New York, you're a New Yorker. If you're from Boston, you're a Bostonian. And if you're from Los Angeles, you're just from Los Angeles. They don't even come up with a somewhat interesting name for themselves. I don't know why, because over there in Britain, you got Scousers, you got Yorkies, Geordies, you've got, Brummies, you got everyone over there. You got cool names for everyone. But here in the United States, We don't, sadly. So unfortunately, there really is no name for people from Birmingham in the United States. So with that, I hope that answers the question. And I thank you so much for the support, and I thank you for the kind words as well. We try our best to report the news as best we can, and I'm glad it is up to your standards. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right. And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Squamous Amos, who says, do you think it's possible that the nuclear power plant facility is being targeted by Ukraine? This plot arc still confuses me.
And yes, we actually answered that a little bit earlier. And thank you for the question for me to recap on that. Matthew and me have had questions as to whether the Ukrainians are the ones committing those attacks or not. But I think, Matthew, considering what we saw tonight with the Russian coming up with that clear lie, it's pretty evident that the Russians apparently are the ones hitting the plant. Because there's no...
Yes, and I have strong doubts that the Ukrainians would even risk shooting anything near the plant. So I think it's Russians and a false flag operation, if I had to take a guess. But then again, it's still kind of speculation.
But honestly, to answer that question, considering that the Russian guy literally pointed at the missile that came in the direction of the Russian-controlled area of Ukraine and said, oh, it came from that way because it did a U-turn midair and then slammed back down to the ground. That tells me it's clearly a lie, and that guy's desperate to paint the story a certain way. So I would say it's actually the Russians doing it, and they're trying to commit a false flag. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, and I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from the Pitman 4G63, who says bonk.
Bonk. That's the Super Bonker 9000 shove.
Yes.
And I thank you.
He just said bonk.
And I thank you so much for the support, and I thank you for the bonk. And Vichna Slava Sim, Slava Ukraini. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Alex Burleton, who says, I've been around since the first couple of weeks, and thanks you all for your hard work, he actually said. So Alex, you've been around for Moscow Mike, you've been around for all the good events.
And yes, I do thank you for the support. And also, you have been around for all those fun little events. And I have to say, each one of them was a defining moment in our channel's history. We've had so many of them, honestly, when you think about it. And it's crazy because this channel has almost built up its own history over time. Yeah, I never really think about it, but some of y'all will always be like, "Hey, you remember when the bot attacks were happening? And do you remember when Moscow Mike was on and all that?" And it's crazy, honestly, to think that we've gone through so much and gotten so far. And also, I saw someone ask this, Matthew. Let me see if I can find him. David Malone asked, "Who has the best hamburgers? The best hamburgers of the Birminghamers?" And so I have to ask you, Matthew, in our fine city of Birmingham, Alabama, who has the mingin? Well, not the mingin. That means they're terrible. Who has the best hamburgers?
I mean, if I had to say honestly, probably Five Guys, but they've gotten way too expensive. Culver's, I would have to say.
What? Ah, man.
I know who you're about to say.
Yeah, you know what I'm about to say. It's our local hamburger, kind of like hamburger chain. It's called a Hamburger Heaven. And they don't give you a lot of fries. That's kind of, I guess, what Matthew's strike would probably be against him, is that the fry quantity you get.
Big strike.
Yeah, it's incredibly small, but their burgers are made personally for you. I'm kidding about that. It's not like a yogurt shop where you go in there, oh, you want sprinkles? You know, it's not that. It's just that each hamburger is actually like charbroiled legitimately. The stuff is thick. I mean, like, if you buy a burger from Hamburger Heaven, you're getting your money's worth out of that cow. I mean, like, they're giving you half the cow on a quarter pounder. The quarter pounder is like a 2-pounder. So with that, I hope that answers the question in a way, because out of the best hamburger shops in Birmingham, Alabama, make sure to check out a Hamburger Heaven, because they are delicious. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. And I hope that, well, actually, you didn't throw in a super chat. It was a live chat question, and I hope that answers that fairly well. And if you do drop by this place, get a Hamburger Heaven burger. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And let's see here. It looks like the poll has sort of gotten a pretty good bit of votes on it. Where are you from? It looks like 65% said North America, 18% said Europe, 14% said Oceania, excuse me, and 3% said Asia. So barely any viewers from Asia. It's kind of crazy, but a ton from North America, and the runner-up is Europe.
And I have to say that is really interesting that we only have 3% viewers from Asia, but then again, that would make sense because the other two options we gave, there was a lot of wiggle room in there for a lot of native English speaking people, especially within Oceania and Europe, considering that a lot of our viewers are from the United Kingdom, European wise. And so I could see that. And there's not a lot of people who speak English well or at all in Asia. A lot of people think that English is an international language that a lot of people have learned at this point. And if you go to tourist destinations in a lot of countries, that's true. But at the same time, there's a lot of people within those countries that do not know English. There's a lot of Chinese people, Han Chinese, and all the Chinese around the People's Republic of China and Taiwan, which is a totally separate country, that don't speak English at all. There's a lot of Indians and Pakistanis that don't speak English at all either. And also, surprisingly enough, although a lot of English-speaking people travel to Japan and a decent amount of people in Japan can speak English, surprisingly enough, something like 80 to 90% of their population cannot speak English. So with that, I kind of understand why we don't get a lot of viewers from Asia, is because a lot of them probably can't even understand what we're saying because they speak a different language. And also, someone just said, you're obsessed with the UK. And yeah, I mean, it's a neat place. Canada and the United States is a neat place too. But with that, I hope that does kind of address the poll for a second. And that was really cool to know where all of y'all were from.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Ronnie Fit once again, who says, I challenge you to a baby pool jelly fight in the old ways. What the hell is that?
Well, let's pull that up.
Ronnie Fit has a snootful, I'm convinced.
Baby pool jelly fight. What in the... Man, you gotta tell me, what in the hell is a baby pool jelly fight? I can't even find that on the internet.
There's nothing on the internet about it.
There's nothing on the internet for this. This honestly sounds like some Turkish wrestling. Have you seen that, Matthew?
It must be like an inside joke on his channel or something, because I've never heard of that.
So if y'all haven't ever seen Turkish oil wrestling, this is about the closest thing this sounds like. Your goal is to stick your hand down the other person's pants and lather yourselves up with oil. And if that doesn't sound slightly weird as a sport, I mean, like, I don't know. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses the comment, Ronnie. And I don't know what the hell that means, but we will look into it. And so with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again for the craziest super chat we've gotten tonight.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Forrest Kopp, who says, respect and thanks for your hard work. I hope others can also contribute as well.
And thank you so much for the support. We try our best to make sure that the news on here is the best it can be, and I'm glad that you do enjoy it. That is, of course, the goal. And one thing that some people, not really a lot of people anymore, but some people kind of get into the doom and gloom of the war. I have seen a few, and they'll be like, "Oh man," and I don't know how people could watch that kind of news. There's a lot to be sad for, but there's a lot to be happy for all the time too. And I always like to focus on the positive. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. Thank you for enjoying this channel, and thank you for supporting us to help this thing keep going. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from our viewer in Israel, Yuri Bench, who says, it's a shame the Russians didn't bury Putin before Gorbachev.
I know, wasn't it? I mean, like, honestly, I'd rather have Pizza Hut Gorby Man around instead of wide walking Pooty Man. That's just me. And hopefully he'll be joining them soon. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. Hope that does address the comment. And we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Lucky Larry, who's not related at all to Lucky Strike cigarettes, who says, with the changes to the war the drone has made, do you think the anti-drone units could be made using birds of prey like some no-fly zone do in the USA?
Birds of prey. Oh, I would hate to do that to a bird of prey, you see, because a falcon there's very few falcons. It's very hard to raise them. And on top of that, I think they would probably get mangled by a decent drone blade, because one thing you have to remember is that people are industrious, and in a war, no one is going to give a hoot about a falcon or anything like that. And so one thing that people could do is they could start trying to put a razor blade onto the propellers because if I was in a war and a hawk was taking down my drone, I would just put razor blades on, I'm just saying, Not encouraging that people to do that. Do not do that. But in a war, if you're trying to get something done and some bird was eating your drone or taking it down or something, I'll just put razor blades on the thing. And I think that would be done. And also on top of that, even if they didn't do that, I feel like there's a lot of room for birds of prey to be seriously injured and killed trying to take down drones. But then again, I don't really know a lot about that. That's the first time I heard about it. But still, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I mean, like that, I feel like that would be a pretty risky and expensive venture. So with that, I hope that answers the question, at least in a way. And we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support and a really interesting question. That's one of the more interesting ones we've had.
And moving right along, up next, we have a $5 super chat from StrayCat241, who says the Ukrainian buggies look pretty capable because the suspension arms are longer than the American. Better capabilities with longer arms. And did they have leaf springs?
No, they had some kind of like a torsion spring, it looked like. I probably got that wrong. Don't quote me on that, y'all. I don't know nothing about suspensions, but it looks like it had something else rather than a leaf spring. But with that, to answer that real quick, I would have to say the Ukrainian buggies looked really good. I don't know if they're better than the American ones. They looked very similar. They may be built off of that design, but they do look really good. And I can't wait to see if they perform as well as they were in that video out in the field. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment. And thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, big shout out to Junebug without the 72 on the end, who puts a $4 donation into the stream. So thank you very much for your support, Junebug, as always. And up next, we have a $4 donation from Rodnoff Claw, who says, what is your opinion about other channels who are reporting the Kherson counterattack has failed and Ukraine has been pushed back to staring positions? Fake news, question mark.
As far as we know, it is fake news because the Ukrainian reports that are coming out are that the Ukrainians have broken through the first line of Russian defenses. The Ukrainians have said, however, that the offensive has slowed a little, and they are facing some stiff resistance in some areas, which leads me to believe that their reports are largely true. However, we are hearing from Russian reports that they've completely swiped the counterattack off the field and the Ukrainians are running towards Kryvyi Rih and Mykolaiv. I don't believe that for a second, because when a counterattack fails or an offensive fails, the army, historically, would stop their offensive and then immediately dig in where they are. They don't start retreating. You know, it's not a movie. You know, the orcs don't fight the elves or whatever, you know, that you would see in some movie on TV, and the elves lose, and then they just start turning around and running away. I mean, that's something that you do in a massive line battle. In a modern war, what you'll do is that you'll just start disengaging the units from the fight, pull them back just a little where they'll reset their defensive positions, and then they'll just sit there. Think about it. Think about it in a World War I perspective. When the Germans, or the French, or the British, or the Americans, for example, later on in the war, would push an offensive and it would fail, you wouldn't see them then immediately lose 10 miles of front line. They would just immediately go back to their front line trenches. The front line would largely stabilize. So in that regard, I don't believe that's true, and I think those people are spreading misinformation away, because honestly, we don't know what's going on down there rather than the occasional vague report from here from time to time. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question in a way, and thank you so much for the support and an interesting question.
And up next, we have a $3 super chat from Sentient Cabbage Man, who says Ukraine needs our most powerful weapon, pocket sand.
Oh man, that's a King of the Hill reference.
I'll be honest, totally honest, I didn't even get it.
I can't show it on stream, but there's this guy who is in the King of the Hill, you know, like that boy ain't right. You know that little cartoon?
Yeah, I think so.
So there's this guy who has like sand in his pocket, and someone was like messing with him. I think it was like a Native American fella, and the guy said pocket sand, and he just threw sand in his eyes and ran off.
Oh,
but that's what he's talking about. And I gotta say, the Ukrainians hopefully got some pocket eye sand around, and if they don't, there's this massive desert down here. Well, it's kind of a desert. The Olesky Sands National Nature Park, and this thing is literally just like a giant dune. I don't know why it exists. I don't know if this was naturally made or Soviet made, but it is kind of crazy. But with that, I hope that does address the comment, and thank you so much for the support and a cool little reference to King of the Hill.
All right, and next up, we have a $3 super chat from Will, who says, keep up the great work, you guys.
And thank you so much for the support, Will. And we are going to try and keep up that great work as best we can and continue to cover this news until the very end of the war. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $3 super chat from Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin, who says, just stay healthy and last long enough to be able to report the end of the war. And after that, meh. Oh, man. He's just putting it right out there.
Well, I thank you for the support. We are going to continue to cover this war until the very end, and hopefully by that time, our channel will be cemented as an incredible news reporting source and information source for really anything, and a lot of people will continue to enjoy watching this channel, and the Lee Spring Army will continue to survive even after this war. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have another $3 super chat from John Mark Pagan Owl, who says, in all caps, type best sniper in World War I.
Best sniper in World War I?
Yes.
In World War I. That's quite the name. Francis Pegamagabo. Pegamagabo. I think.
He's Canadian.
He's Canadian. I think he's actually, let's see, Canadian First Nations soldier. So he's a Native American. Let's see his
nickname was Peggy.
That's a lot more pronounceable for me. I'm going to call him Peggy. So Peggy here, Peggy, my boy, he killed how many people as a sniper? Because that's what you always look for as a sniper. Let's see. Military career. Let's read this. Oh my god! Using the much maligned Ross rifle, a really neat rifle, he was credited with killing 378 Germans and capturing 300 more. My god, this man was a one-man army.
Dang.
Now that is deserving of a little bit of praise right there. And I gotta say, cool little story. I thank you so much for bringing that up so that way we could give a little bit of credit to this guy. Because everyone in the United States knows Alvin York, well, hopefully you do, who was our American hero of the war. But Francis Peggy, he is certainly Canada's hero of the war, and quite a guy. I mean, like, hell, I don't know of a lot of snipers who were able to rack up a count like that. Let's actually look at the best snipers in history list and see what he ranks on it. There's Simo Haiha. Oh, well, obviously, it's top of the list. Let's see here. Can we get the list, like an itemized list from top to bottom? Apparently not. Oh,
it looks like he's number 4.
Let's see here. So, I'm going to use allocation to find these numbers, and well, let's see here. Oh, wait a minute, hang on. We'll just go up to number 1 and then scroll our way back down. Okay, so number 1, if y'all don't know, it's Simo Haiha. He's a pretty happy guy. Pretty cheery. He killed about 505 people on his own. Pretty impressive, honestly. He's actually Finnish. He actually did that during the Winter War, which we usually compare the Ukraine War to. The number 2 guy on the list is Fyodor Oplokov. I'm sorry about that, mispronounced that. He was a Soviet sniper that served in the Second World War, or as they call it in the former Soviet states, the Great Patriotic War. The number 3 guy is Francis Peggy. He's number 3 in the world. That's actually something right there. Let's see who number 4 was. Carlos Hathcock. There's a lot of jokes you can make with that one. But
born in Little Rock, actually, it looks like Arkansas.
Hey, Little Rock. He's representing the Southeast. But this guy was actually a sniper in the Vietnam War, and one of his most interesting stories, because I have heard about this guy, is that he actually wore a white feather on his hat to give the other snipers a fair chance, and one of the shots he made actually went straight through the scope of a counter sniper and right into his eye and killed him. So this guy is pretty cool. He's not the highest, you know. The next guy up on the list got 378 kills. He got 93, but still, once you get in the range of being in the top 10 around the world, I think you're on up there. So still, I got to give a lot of credit to Francis Peggy, though. That is That is impressive. And also, look at the battles he was involved in. The Second Battle of Ypres, the Battle of the Somme, Passchendaele, the Second Battle of Passchendaele, the 100 Days Offensive, the Second Battle of the Somme, and the Battle of the Scarpe. I mean, that guy was everywhere. So with that, we're going to move on to the next one. Thank you so much for the support, and thank you for letting us take a look at that guy.
And next up, we have a $2 super chat from Squamous Amos, who says, eat something.
And thank you so much for the support, Squamous Amos. And I will eat something after stream, probably. Once Matthew and me get off stream, we just start cramming our mouths full of food before we go to bed, because we're usually starving at that point. But I do thank you for the support, and we will make sure to get a little bit of food. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Squamous Amos. And we are on to the next one.
And up next, another $2 super chat from Kaltenberg, who says, there are other reasons not to sing.
And also, thank you so much for the support. And I would say, if you're talking about singing, yes, that there is a lot more reasons to not sing on this channel, because I can't. And if you're talking about singing as in giving away information about the Ukrainians, there is a lot of reasons not to. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. And I'd have to agree, whichever way you're meaning that. And so with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have another $2 super chat from Squamous Amos, who says, 2 Russians, 1 trench. No wonder you're about to bleh.
Someone picked up on the joke, and I got to thank you for the support. And yes, that was a really good joke, and I like how you tied them all together. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $2 super chat from Pepper Jack Shack, who says, who broadcasting live? LSA.
And we are broadcasting live. LSA, LSA. I always find it, I'm proud that we're still able to continue to live stream. And of course, it's a huge thing to me. It means a lot to me, and I'm glad that we are. And so with that, thank you so much for the support, and it's good to be back, baby. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $2 super chat from StrayCat241, who says, thanks you for most of the detailed daily updates.
And thank you so much for supporting us, and thank you for enjoying them. We try our best, and I'm glad that you are still continuing to enjoy these daily updates. We are only 8 days away from the 200th day of this war, which is unbelievable, because it seems like it was just yesterday that we were on the 100th day of this war. And so with that, I can't wait to have everyone around for the 200th day. We're probably going to be doing something special then, because if it's 8 days in the future, let me actually check my calendar. What day will that be? So we got 8 days. That will be Saturday. Saturday. That's crazy. Next Saturday will be the 200th day of war. And so with that, thank you once again. We're going to do something special for that day. Maybe a special opening video or something similar. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a super chat from Prometheus, who puts in a $2 donation and asks a pretty popular question. How well do you think F-16s would fare in Ukraine?
Well, I would think that F-16s would fare fairly fair.
Dang. Of course, did you have to?
Yeah,
did you have to
I
do
had
it?
to. I had to. But I think the F-16s would do incredibly well. The F-16 is a competent aircraft. Of course, the United States uses loads of them to this day. It's one of the most common fighters in our inventory, and I like it. And I think it does really well at its job. So with that, I hope that answers the question. And I would have to say that's almost unanimous. I think everyone agrees that the F-16 would do fairly well. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support. Thank you for asking a good question.
All right, and up next, we have a $2 super chat from Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin once again, who says 2 weeks ago, 90,000 subs, and today, 96,000.
And that's true. You are right. We actually have had a little bit of a boom recently. Let me check something real quick. We are now at 96,236 subscribers. So we're now less than, we're like around 3,750 subscribers away from reaching 100,000. Now, I hope that YouTube gives us a silver plaque for that, because now that we've gotten copyright strikes, and also I've heard that it's really iffy if they ever do send those out, I'm hoping that we get one. Because it would mean a lot to me. We haven't really gotten a lot of credit for the fundraising, and I never looked for any, but it would be neat to have something to show, something physical to show. So I would like to get a little silver plaque at least. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support. And yes, we are only like gee, probably just a week or several weeks away from getting all the way up there to the very top at 100,000. And so with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And yes, we'll hit 100,000 before you even know it. It's just a short while away. And hopefully YouTube will send us that plaque because it has been a very, very long time coming. But anyways, up next we have a $2 super chat. And it's actually the return of Mr. Lunchtime. He puts in $2 of his lunch money once again and says, Mr. Lunchtime welcomes you back. Stay toasty, my friends.
Hey, Mr. Lunchtime! It's good to have you back. And also, thank you for welcoming us back. It was a terrible time away for that day, that whole day. And I'm glad to be back. And I'm glad that you're glad I'm back. Hey! And Mr. Lunchtime's about to eat us all. And so, thank you so much for the support. And I'm glad that you do enjoy us being back. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And a big shout out to Michael Cabrera for putting in a $5 super chat without a comment, but he does throw in a super sticker of a pear jumping around, waving its arms in the air, wearing a party hat, and with a little party tutor too.
A party tutor. I was wondering what to call that
tutor.
too. I was like, what's he going to call that? Because I forgot the name of it. He said party tutor. I like that.
A party snoot.
So with that, I thank you for the support, Michael Cabrera. It does help us out a lot, and I like the little dancing pear. That's a nice little thing. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $2 super chat from Sentient Cabbage Man, once again, who says, Ukraine right now. No, my cabbages.
I think, I don't know where that's from specifically. It's like something with air. It's a movie about, what is it? Well, it's like that movie of the blue creatures. It has like a similar name. I forgot what that movie. It came out.
The blue creatures.
Yeah, God, what is the name of that movie? It was the most forgettable movie ever. The blue alien creatures, how that guy went to the other planet, he was in a wheelchair, he got put in a pod, and then he turned into a blue alien.
Are you talking about Megamind or something?
No. It's let me pull it up. Blue alien movie.
That's good. Pull up something interesting.
That's it, Avatar.
Oh, Avatar. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, Avatar. I think that was the highest grossing movie of all time. But anyways, I'm trying to think about this. It has something to do with Avatar. I forgot what it is. It's like air or something with Avatar. Anyways, I think it comes from that because I've seen that meme before. And so with that, thank you for the support. I'm sorry that I can't really remember the meme all too well, but no, my cabbages. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have another super chat from Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin, who puts in a $7 super chat and says, from now on, the only music you will play is the Ukrainian anthem, okay?
Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin. I thank you so much for your support. Now, to answer that question, yes, that's true. We actually replaced the HIMARS song with elevator music for the reason it got copyrighted. And so, with that in mind, we are probably only going to play the Ukrainian anthem because it ain't copyrighted. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. And also, I saw someone say in the live chat, I saw this. I got to read it again. Where was it? Someone said, because I got to read it, man. I got to read it. Dang it, I can't find him. Someone said he had to add 1,500 plus 900 and he's in college. LOL. And I'm assuming you're joking, but you got to remember, I'm doing everything on this channel ad lib. I don't have a script in front of me. I don't have anything to work off of. And so I got a million things going in my head about the pacing, the tempo I'm trying to keep, what I'm about to say, how to put everything together into a nice little bow. And so doing additional mathematics, even if it's just simple addition, trying to focus on that for a second could throw me way off. And so instead of trying to do that and screw over the whole show, I decided to pull out a calculator and do it instead. So with that, please forgive me for trying to keep a million things straight in my head, and we're on to the next one.
And up next, a big shout out to Lurch Eyebold for putting in a $1 donation to the channel without a comment. So thank you very much for your support. And for our final super chat of the night, until we move on to our live chat questions, we have a $1 super chat from Digital Bladeca, who says, relax, folks. Molasses like. You guys rock.
And thank you for the support. We actually did get molasses just a couple of days ago, talking about that literally, and it tasted like Flint, Michigan water. It was terrible. We're getting that stuff returned, and it was awful. But with that, thank you for the support and the kind words, and we are going to keep this up as long as we can. And so thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And we have now reached the end of the super chat segment. And so we're now going into the live chats, and we're going to try, we got another one, but we'll answer that one, and then we'll move into the live chat segment and answer as many live chats as we can.
All right, and to address Richie MC's $5 super chat, he said, it's been some time. Any new theory on what attacked the Saki Air Base in Crimea?
What attacked the Saki Air Base? Saki's a liquor in Japan. I'm really smart. Anyways, let's get to the map. Well, what about the map? Where's the map? Anyways, we'll just Crimea. I'll pull it up. All right, so Saki Air Base right here. What hit the Saki Air Base, from what we've been assuming for now, was Ukrainian missiles. Some kind of a missile. We're assuming it may have been an ATACMS or a HREM or a GROM. So with that, I hope that answers your question. And I thank you so much for the support. And I hope that answers it somewhat fairly well. Some people do think it's still Special Forces, but I'm somewhat reluctant on that, due to a lot of reasons that would take like an hour for me to explain. So with that, I hope that answered the question fairly well. And we're now on to the first live chat question of the night.
And the first live chat question goes to Henry M., who says, I heard today that the United States went to DEFCON 2. I don't know if that's true or not.
U.S. DEFCON level today. Does anyone keep track of that publicly? We're now on the website called Operation Military Kids, because we are kids. Why are we at DEFCON level 3? According to this website, and this was published on June 5th of 2022, which may not be accurate.
That's old.
That's very
old news, Enforcer.
Oh, come on, Enforcer. That's old.
Yeah.
Let's see. September 2nd. Wait a minute. What? The Taiwanese military shot down an unidentified unmanned civilian drone near Kinmen, Taiwan on Thursday, September 1st.
Wow.
What? How in the world do we not hear about that? Anyways, I'll have to check out the DEFCON level website. Chinese military aircraft and 8 PLAN vessels were spotted around the island of Taiwan on the 1st. That's not enough for an invasion. We already did the math, and I'm still trying to make that video. Let's see. Oh, man. I don't think it's DEFCON 2. It looks like, according to this website, it's DEFCON 3. So with that, unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's gone. Well, actually, fortunately, it hasn't gone to DEFCON 2, because that would be somewhat scary. We'll actually click on DEFCON 2, which is a little... It's called Fast Pace. Very nice.
What does that mean?
DEFCON 2, or Fast Pace, is a red color condition level similar to a red alert warning level status. DEFCON 2 means we are at the next step to war or a nuclear threat. During this alert level, the United States Armed Forces are ready and prepared to ship out in 6 hours' time or less, hence the name Fast Pace. DEFCON 2, or Fast Pace, is the second highest condition level in the warning system, with only alert level 1 being higher. The alert status may be changed on this level after intelligence findings indicate a risk for an impending attack, such as the case in the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, when the alert status was changed to Fast Pace for the Strategic Air Command. DEFCON 2, or Fast Pace, has been reached only once for the SAC, or Strategic Air Command, during the Cold War Cuban Missile Crisis in October 26, 1962, after Soviet missile pads were found in Cuba, but changed to alert level 3 after a short time. So apparently, I'm guessing we've never reached DEFCON 1. Or Cocked Pistol.
Wow, that's a hell of a name.
Yeah, I like that. Let's see. So, yes, we've never reached DEFCON 1, because DEFCON 1 means that we're about to get nuked. Hopefully, we'll never reach that level, and apparently, we've only reached DEFCON 2 once, and that was back in the Cuban Missile Crisis. And so I hope that answers your question, and we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Ezo448, who says, considering all the factors, is there a safe way or tactic that Ukraine can employ to retake the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant?
I can't, honestly, no. I mean, I don't think there could be, because the Russian forces are garrisoned there. So if the Ukrainians ever try to retake the plant, there are Russians there they will have to fight unless if they withdraw from the area. So honestly, I don't think there would be a way for them to do that without some kind of bloodshed or putting the power plant in jeopardy. And I believe that's why the Ukrainians are trying to make a demilitarized zone around the power plant, so that way it never has to come down to it. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question in a way, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, big shout out to Dupper Bob for putting in a $2 super chat and throwing in a super sticker of the pair acting rather coy for some weird reason. But anyways, thank you, Dupper Bob, for the support, and we appreciate you very much. And let's see here. We got a $20 super chat from Praise Adonai, who says, Enforcer plus Matt, other channels hype titles for clickbait. According to some, all the Russian generals are dead. It would not surprise me if some sergeant in Donbass wakes up tomorrow and finds he's been promoted to general.
Well, thank you for the support, Praise Adonai, but one thing I'd like to say is that while our titles, I will say this, since they're in all caps, I will give the benefit of the doubt and say they do look clickbaity, but we always have truth to our titles. You know, they're made, of course, to grab attention, but we always want to make sure that our content is truthful, and as far as we know, the Russians are in full retreat in the Kherson area from some reports we've heard. We have heard that Russian forces in some areas are putting up a little bit of a stiffer resistance, but by and large, it sounds like they're flowing backwards, back towards the river in sheets and waves. So that's always something I like to point out. And there's always people, because a lot of people think that we run a 3-hour live stream, and because we put something in the thumbnail or the title, that we're going to be covering that the entire stream. And I don't think they understand that we cover the entire Frontline's worth of news and then also answer as many questions as we can. But I do thank you for the support, and I do agree that a lot of people certainly do that. And while we appear to do that, we always make sure that our titles are backed up with something that has happened today. And so I hope that does answer the question fairly well. Praise Adonai, and thank you so much for the support once again. And also, it wouldn't surprise me if a sergeant in the Donbass became a general either. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a live chat question from Trademarks and Patents for Growing Businesses, who says, I missed the nightly Russian losses update. Could we please have it back?
We could bring it back, and I will try and see about doing it. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Steve Hockey4, who says, does the eventual capture of Kherson temporarily end the southern campaign? With the blowing of the bridges, Ukraine will have to regroup and restart in Zaporizhia.
Could you reread that one real quick?
Yes. Steve said, does the eventual capture of Kherson temporarily end the southern campaign? With the blowing of the bridges, Ukraine will have to regroup and restart in Zaporizhia.
Yes, that is correct. I think that will most likely be the way the front line evolves. Considering that the Ukrainians have knocked out all 3 bridge crossings across the Dnieper River, it will be as difficult for them to cross it as it will be for the Russians to retreat on it. So I think as soon as they retake the Kherson finger, that entire offensive operation will stop. I believe the Ukrainians will most likely focus on counterattacks in other areas that would be easier for them to conduct. And one of those areas that I'm looking at would most likely be the flat open grounds of the Zaporizhia plain. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, because I do entirely agree with that assessment. I believe that's an incredibly accurate one. And with that, we are on to the next one. And once again, take it with a grain of salt, my assessments, because while we have gotten a lot right, there's always room for me to be wrong. I'm not a supposed expert. I know history. I work off of that as my precedent. But just because I'm on this channel and a lot of people are listening does not make me right all the time. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Richard Purnell, who says, do you think Kherson could become Russia's Dunkirk?
It could. I think it would more so become their Stalingrad. Hopefully not in terms of the destruction of the city. But Stalingrad, in a way, if y'all didn't know, during the Battle of Stalingrad, which we'll pull up here on Google Maps because it'll show it a little bit better, the Russians controlled the western side of the river, but the Germans, of course, were fighting inside of Stalingrad itself, and this is Stalingrad, actually. They fought all the way until the Russians were backed up to just a couple of 100 yards, if not hundreds of feet, from the banks of the Volga River, and the Russians would ferry over more men to go into that battle and try and hold the beach that they pretty much had at that point. I think it could become much like that, but instead of the Russians trying to hold Kherson / Volgograd and eventually retake it, the Russians will be trying to hold the beach or the shore of the river while they try and evacuate the Russian soldiers out of the city and into the thick marshy swamps of the Dnipro River. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, at least as far as I'm concerned, and I hope I've given a pretty decent historical precedent for the answer. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, Praise Adonai said in the live chat, he said, Matt, I did not mean to imply that the enforcer is using clickbait. You're not like the other channels. Total integrity and LSA.
Also, Praise Adonai, I do not want you to think for a moment I thought you said that. I'm sorry if it came off that way. I was just addressing what you were saying, and I do agree that a lot of channels do use clickbaity stuff. But one thing I have seen a little bit tonight, I don't know if they're bots or what, but some people have come through and said, clickbait, or like when we're in the middle of what's not even our topic for
the bots are back.
Yeah, because I would be covering the location unknowns, which is not what the title and thumbnail is about, and they would come in here and go clickbait. And so like when you brought that up, I was like, oh, that's a perfect time to address those statements, because it was something I was looking at and I was like, we haven't even gotten to that part of the news yet. Just be patient. So with that, don't think that at all. I didn't think that at all about your comment, and I thank you so much for the support. And also and sometimes I'm very grateful to viewers who allow me to sometimes take in the side like that, because that comment was the perfect time for me to do that. And so thank you so much once again, and don't think that at all. That was not at all what I was intending it to be. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Rule Jared, or Jared, I think. Rule Jared. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that properly. But he says, keep doing you, boys.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, Rule Jared, and we will make sure to keep doing us, I guess. I've always been doing me since the very start, and I'm glad that a lot of people do enjoy it and want us to keep this thing going, because I want it to keep going, Matthew wants to keep it going, we all enjoy what we do, and I'm trying to move us in a direction where we're covering a lot of stuff, because right now we only cover Ukraine, but I want to cover a lot more as well, and hopefully given time, we'll be able to do that. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and we are going to keep doing us the best we can.
And up next, we have a question from Temporary Human, who says, if Russia is so badly affected by U.S. satellite intelligence and having fallen so far behind in space, do you think they would deliberately cause a Kessler syndrome effect or event?
Kessler syndrome.
I'm not sure what that is.
I'm not exactly sure either. So Kessler syndrome is a phenomenon in which the amount of junk in orbit around Earth reaches a point where it just creates more and more space debris, causing big problems for satellites, astronauts, and mission planners. I bet everyone's gonna be like, but anyways, I wonder. Eventually, I will say this. Kessler syndrome, from what it sounds like, is probably a decent issue. And based off of that, looks like it might be a big issue. However, everything will deorbit itself eventually. And everything that is in orbit around the Earth will eventually spiral in far enough that it just re-enters Earth's atmosphere and burns up. So with that, I hope it doesn't become too big of an issue, because that would be a big problem. And also, let's look at this little picture. Obviously, the sky above Earth doesn't look like this. This is probably, this is definitely dramatized just for the purposes of showing it. But it's really interesting to think we've launched so many satellites into space. It's just kind of getting filled with junk. But with that, I thank you so much for the question. That was a really good one. And I don't know, maybe. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right. And next up, we have a question from Nick Poole, who says, Enforcer, outside of tanks, armored personnel carriers, HMLRS, and air defense systems, what else can the United States send, or any country, to help Ukraine in this war?
I believe we could send aircraft as well as main battle tanks. The M1 Abrams are a competent tank, and I believe we could send a couple of those over there to help out the Ukrainians. And I also believe that some F-16s would help out incredibly as well. And so with that, I hope that answers the question. And we're now going to answer 3 more questions from the live chat, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Mike P., who says, I wonder how soon before SPGs have a crew section for drone operators.
That's an incredibly good question, and I'm not exactly sure when that would happen. Honestly, I think that the drones are so easy to use that that role may be given to the commander, considering, well, I don't know. I mean, maybe they will attach a staff, well, not a staff car, a car to the unit, where there's a driver and a drone operator that follows the artillery or leads the artillery forward. I'm not entirely sure, but that is actually a really good question. And in the future, I'm sure we'll see that pan out in multiple different ways, considering it's brand new and everyone's trying to pioneer that space of warfare right now. And we'll probably see a lot of different ideas and implementations across multiple different countries on how drones are implemented into the artillery. And so with that, I hope that answers the question. And we're now on to the second to last question of the night.
And the second to last one goes to Bill G, who says Russia claims missile makes a U-turn. Did the missile try to defect?
I think it may have. The missile was like, I must leave, and then it turned around and said, no, I don't, and then slammed it to the ground. But I think you read the question. That was a pretty good one. And I guess, I mean, like, maybe the missiles hate Russia so much they have to turn around too. And so with that, I hope that answers the question. We are now on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that lucky last viewer that threw in the lucky last question of the night is sitting and thinking, who says, if the Russians get captured on the right bank of the Dnieper, where will Ukraine keep them all? Do they swap for civilians that have been kidnapped?
I don't really know where the Ukrainians are keeping their prisoners right now. I don't know if they just drop them off in a field or something in the middle of nowhere and just let them sort it out or something. I don't really know. We've never really seen a lot of videos or information about where the Ukrainians keep prisoners of war, but I'm assuming that they would be sent to a filtration camp and then probably a stockade, but I'm not exactly sure. Usually when you're dealing with a large volume of prisoners, you can't really provide them decent facilities, so they just get thrown in a stockade. But a lot of people didn't know that. And sometimes it's not fun being a prisoner of war. Well, that's kind of all the time, actually. But I hope that kind of answers the question in a way. But I feel like if they captured a massive amount of Russian prisoners, they would probably... Man, oh my God, I'm trying to think about what they'd probably do with them. They would probably try and exchange them because they probably couldn't keep them around for long or really care for them. And so they would just try and exchange them for civilians or, like Azov prisoners that may still be alive or other soldiers that have been captured in the war. And so with that, I hope that answers your question, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. It's been an absolute pleasure covering the news to every single one of y'all. I've, of course, enjoyed covering it, and I hope y'all have enjoyed as well. It looks like everyone's been having a fun time with Ronnie in the chat, who has joined us tonight, and he's been here the whole time, and so I hope Ronnie's enjoyed it, and I hope all of y'all have enjoyed it as well. And if you did, please make sure to subscribe. These streams run every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, covering the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine, and minus the... literally once in a blue moon copyright strike that we just had a while ago, we are always here. And so with that, I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the day 193 news of the war in Ukraine, and I thank you all so much once again for coming by. Stay safe and have a great night.